In the middle of recording yesterday with the talented, the delightful Sophia Jones, who joins me every Monday at 3 p.m. here on Golden Days, the topic of the Warriors and the salary cap and just what exactly their options are, what the situation is they find themselves in for this upcoming season. A lot of questions with potentially very complicated answers. The type of topic that you need an expert for. And Eric Pincus, friend of the program, literally an expert when it comes to the NBA salary cap. Right after the show, during the show, his name came up. Right after the show, I reached out to him, and here he is. And again, if you follow this myself or the program on social media, you would have had an opportunity to submit questions for him. I did get a few come in time, and I'll play those on the show. But we're going to talk about the Warriors this offseason. What are their options? What can they get back if they trade Kuminga? Can they add free agents if they keep Kuminga? We're going to get answers. Stay tuned. Eric Pincus, NBA cap expert. He was with Bleacher Report for a damn long time. I don't know if he still is. We'll find out. He'll fill in the details of his own background. And we're going to talk Warriors. We're talking salary cap next. This is the Golden Days.
They always find something to nitpick, and that's because there's expectations for us to win. Leave me alone this summer.
Let's go! In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up.
Welcome to the Golden Days, the name of the program. The name of your host is me, Cyrus Saatsaz. You can follow me on Threads and Instagram at DogWild, over on Twitter. My handle is at Surf Journalist. The program is on both those platforms at Golden Days Pod. Before we bring the brilliant, the highly knowledgeable, a man who calls himself, and rightfully so, an expert when it comes to the NBA salary cap, this disaster of an agreement, a document that restricts player movement, that restricts owners and what they can and can't do in terms of adding talent. What can the Warriors do this offseason? We're going to find out in just a minute after we give some love to our sponsors, the folks who support this program. And side note, before I dive into our sponsor reads, want to send out a friendly reminder that we have openings for sponsorships. If you're interested in being a part of this program, email us, Warriors24pod, Warriors24pod at gmail.com. Our email address, the official one, Warriors24pod at gmail.com. Reach out and let's make some magic together. Let's build and forge an awesome partnership so I can give the kind of love to your organization that I give love to the current sponsors like Decades. And their website is decadesofficial.com. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram at decadesofficial. And in case you're wondering, what is decades? I know that means like it's a term that references a time span of 10 years typically. They're a band, and they're called Decades because they're playing music spanning decades, from the 50s to today, from Chuck Berry to Katy Perry. And look, if you need a visual to help you out, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm always cognizant of the podcast audience. There's a lot of you out there as well. But if you're watching this on YouTube, the visuals are right next to me. So you can see what they can provide to your event. You can see the type of energy and vibe and good times they're going to bring to the party, whether that party is needed for an anniversary, a birthday, maybe it's a corporate fundraiser. Maybe you need to spice things up for your employees. Whatever the scenario, Decades is the band for you. They are so reputable that the San Francisco 49ers hired them to play. Well, I don't know if the Niners themselves hired them for this, but they play the pregame shows. They play pregame shows, live shows before every Niners game next door at Great America. They're called Red Zone Rallies. Decades, the official band for that. They're NorCal natives. They're Golden Dazers. They love the Warriors. They have deep connections and roots to Bay Area sports. They even played Eddie D, the same man who oversaw 5 Super Bowls for the San Francisco 49ers. Eddie D hired them for his private shindig at his compound in Montana, and you could hire them for your event. Decadesofficial.com is the website if you want to reach out to them, or email Kyle@atomicmusicgroup.com. Again, Kyle@atomicmusicgroup.com. Mention Golden Days, mention my name, mention anything affiliated with this program, and you'll get a discount. It's that simple. Decadesofficial.com, or follow them on Facebook and Instagram @DecadesOfficial. Today's episode also brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball is in full swing. The NBA Finals are around the corner. You got the NHL Stanley Cup Finals around the corner, I think. I'm not paying attention to that closely, but usually they coincide with each other, the NBA and NHL championship rounds. You can bet on who the Warriors may sign next as their free agent. There is a lot you can bet on. The action is hot. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from, again, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, UFC. The French Open of tennis is going on right now. And in between games, pour yourself a stiff one. Kick back. Bring the casino vibes to your home and head on over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. And speaking of the game, why don't we bring on Eric Pincus? He's a cap expert, and he joins us next here in the Golden Days. And here he is, right next to me, Eric Pincus. You can follow him on Twitter @Eric Pincus. He's been writing for a lot of very prominent media, publications, newspapers, websites, you name it. He's covered the NBA for a damn long time. And he also hosts, if you don't mind, Eric, I know you said you hope to touch on this at the end of the program. I want to give your sports business class love right off the bat. Why not? You host a fantastic classroom, and this happens every summer. It coincides usually with Summer League and all the stuff happening in Vegas. It's the sports business classroom. It's the business of basketball immersive experience. You're one of 4 instructors, yourself, Bobby Marks, Yazzie Goslin, and Keith Smith, a guest of this program a couple years ago. Before we talk Warriors, Eric, do yourself the classroom, this program, provide the privilege, please, of explaining everyone and how they could participate with you and the instructors and learn.
Of course. Well, this is just one of our majors. We have also we have 4 majors total. Media broadcast with folks like Hall of Fame J.A. Donde, who's incredible. Ooh. Howard Beck. We got the czar, Mike Fratello, actually on our staff this year, which is kind of cool. But also Katie Heindel, CP the franchise, if you're a Knicks fan. And actually Julie Fye, who was PR for the Phoenix Suns for a very long time, is actually part of that. And then we have scouting video analytics. You're working with incredible scouts and learning how to scout. And athlete representation, we have a new major, which is for people who want to be agents. So it's at Summer League in Vegas. You're actually like in the heart of the arena, the Thomas and Mack. You're underneath in one of the rooms, 2 of the rooms, 3 of the rooms. And really the goal is to try to help people break into basketball, into the industry in some form. You know, maybe it's with a team, maybe it's on the agent side, maybe it's PR, maybe it's working with like a shoe company, or, you know, all of the various elements that go. And of course, media and broadcast is, you know, what we're all, I'm sort of in multiple majors. You know, I am in media broadcast, but my expertise is the salary cap, which is why you have me on today. So, I mean, if you're going to learn from, you know, Bobby, Yossi, Keith, myself, you're not going to find many people who, you know, I'll speak for the others. They're incredible. I'm pretty damn good, but you know, they're all incredible. So you're not going to get much better education.
Well, and I feel like this is actually a very good topic to discuss. And here's another graphic in case you're interested in who's instructing students, covering scouting, video analytics. It's fascinating that your instructional institution is growing at the pace that it is. Congratulations on that. And I also find tremendous value. And let me know what your perspective is on this, in the sense that I feel like we're at a very fascinating time in general human existence where, and it is to me very interesting that so many institutions right now are on shaky ground, maybe for good reason. I mean, maybe like all this change that's happening is for the good. But the reason why I bring this up is because like university enrollment is at an all-time low. And I'm curious to know, is this the best time ever to register for a class like this, where instead of maybe spending money on a 4-year university experience, and I'm not saying don't do that, but is popularity in a program like this at an all-time high? Is the success rate at an all-time high? How is your program now, given so many people are looking at other options besides the university setting?
Well, I mean, it's all part of the whole, like there's value in going to college. There's value in getting a master's and PhD. Like there is value in that.
Yeah.
But also there's value in understanding what people are looking for when they want to hire, and building out your network directly with those people, and get us like on your resume, because we have relationships. Like one of our former instructors was a GM of an NBA team, left the NBA to go be a GM at the college level, which is an area of growth right now. It's like, yeah, maybe go to college, but actually help run their program. You know what I mean? It's
Right,
like help
yeah.
run their basketball team, or the sports program. And so, and he needed some, help. Like he needed video coordinators. He's needed talent, and he knows that because he taught for us a couple of years. He knows how much we put into getting to know our students. We just don't like it. It's not like a room full of people who are sitting there in the dark looking at a stage and getting a certificate a few days later. Like it's
right.
It's we have this incredible mock trade deadline that it's kind of my baby, that lasts all the way through the week. There's actually 1 4-hour window to actually execute transactions, and then the last day you have to present as a group, and it's just a lot of fun. I mean, it is wild. It is crazy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun. Our students tend to have, some success. I'll just, to wrap it up. 3 years ago, we had a gentleman named Preston Klaus who was part of our Indiana Pacers team, and he won with his teammates Kyle Goodyear and some of the other folk. They won the competition that particular year as like the best team. Preston got a job with the Mavericks or something like that, was there for about a year, whatever, moved on and ended up at the Indiana Pacers, the team that he won with SBC. Now he has a chance to win a ring this year.
Incredible.
And Buddy Scott won a ring last year with the Celtics. So it's so cool to help, that's part of living the dream. Ultimately, if you're not winning a title, you're still working for a team. It's still living that dream. So it's very cool.
That's incredible.
Can't complain.
And again, like your program is so hyper focused on specific skill sets, specific jobs, which I'm guessing adds to the appeal of your program. And we'll give it some love again before you go. But
sure.
Before we sorry for the redundancies with the verbiage there. We're going to talk Warriors in just a second here, but real fast to wrap up the conversation about your sports business class. Space is limited, right? I mean, you can't just like lollygag and think to yourself, I'm going to wait until the day before it starts before I decide to register.
Sure.
Space is limited. Sportsbusinessclassroom.com is the website. How much? What are you seeing here in terms of enrollment? Should people jump on this now? Is there room? What's the situation there in terms of space?
Yeah, there's the restriction is that there's like a physical space limit. Like we can't go, we can only grow it so much. So there's talk about growing it by doing it like for All-Star or something like, or if we grow it, it might be doing additional ones. This program can only grow so large because we have so much physical space. And so the last count, it was fewer than 20 spots available. We had a class of 135 last year. So we're in that range. I haven't checked in the last day or two, like where we're at right now. But yeah, if you're interested, and it's not like a fantasy camp, you're actually interested in this, making this a potential career. It's an investment in yourself. And, I love the program. I can, seriously say we put a lot of time and love into it.
Yeah.
And if you are interested, please reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation via either Twitter or send me a message or LinkedIn, and we'll get connected. And I had a phone conversation this morning with a prospective student, one yesterday. It's not something that we take frivolously. We really invest our time and energy in trying to get to know students, not just for the week, but really for multiple years and hopefully even longer than that. So.
And look, you've earned credibility. You've been doing this for a damn long time. So when you say something is true, I'm going to believe it. And something tells me this is a phenomenal experience, especially if you're aspiring to get into this game. And there's a lot of opportunities. The beautiful thing about the NBA is it's growing. I don't see where it's going to stop growing. I feel like the only part of this game that's not growing is expenditures on personnel. And you have all these rules so the owners can protect themselves from spending too much. And besides that, we're seeing expansion everywhere. And the Golden State Warriors find themselves in a very peculiar situation, like a lot of teams in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're going to get a lot of player movement, not so much with free agency, but I think more so with trades. And Eric, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. But let's start with the Golden State Warriors. And I'm going to give you some audience questions as well in just a moment here. But a lot of talk regarding potential trades for Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jonathan Kuminga. I think we should start there because he's going to be likely a restricted free agent. I don't think that's official yet. He has a bunch of scenarios in front of him, and restricted free agency is one of those. Can you enlighten myself and the audience, please, on the Jonathan Kuminga situation? Are the Warriors limited in terms of what they can offer him? Can they offer him the max amount that he wants and still make other moves? Take it away, sir.
Sure. Well, the Warriors are, like any other team, they have the restrictions of the collective bargaining agreement. And it's not just to protect the owners from overspending. It's to protect the system itself, because the players, they're getting half of the money that comes in. It's not exactly half, but let's call it 50-50. It's like 49-51, but let's say 50-50. So let's say that we'll just round it. 10 billion comes in. The players get 5.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, contracts are given out like 4 or 5, 6 years almost. Like if you look at Halliburton getting a 5-year extension, or Scotty Barnes getting a 5-year extension, or Cade getting a 5-year extension off of their last year, they're under contract for 6 years. So you have trades, you have buyouts, you have trade bonuses, renegotiations, you have all these different mechanisms. And how it magically gets to that 50-50, it's basically impossible. You need a system to make sure that the teams don't overspend, because if they overspend, then every player is going to lose 10% of their money. In fact, this last season, the one that's just finishing, players are only going to get about 91%. We're rounding a little bit, but call it 91%. So if you were signing for 10 million, you got 9.1, which you and I can say I'd love to get 9.1 million. But if you're a professional and you sign a contract for 10, you would think you want to get 10. You would, obviously there's taxes and stuff like that. But like if your gross income is not the gross that was promised, that's not good for anyone. The agents who sign them don't get commission on that money. Or it could go the other way. What if teams don't spend enough? Then we have a different problem. And then the teams have to pay money, and that goes to the MBPA, and then everybody gets a bonus. So that's good for the players, not for the agents. They don't get a commission on that. And it's not good for the teams because they're spending more than they had budgeted. So the system has to get as close as possible organically to 50-50. That's why we have to break the spending. It's not a target on the Warriors because they were winning too much. That's just not. It's the teams that spend the most that are causing everyone in terms of players to lose money, because every player is not getting, they're getting 91 cents on the dollar. That's not what we want. From a system point of view, when I say we, the system doesn't want that. The league doesn't want that. The MBPA doesn't want that. The players don't want that. They want to get their whole check. And for LeBron or something who plays for 20-something years, Steph, like this stuff will average out, like the highs and lows. But for someone who's in the league for 2-3 years, if you just happen to be in the league for a short time, right when the money's not great, like this year, you're only getting 90% or so of what, 91% of what, you only this brief time that you're NBA. You get a cup of coffee in the NBA. And unfortunately, that's most players. They don't have like these incredibly long careers. So that's kind of the preamble. As far as Kuminga, like, the challenge is they have all the flexibility in the world to pay him as much as even possible within the rules. So they can max him out outright. They can give him up to 39 million. We're assuming the cap is just under 155.
Okay.
They can pay him about 30, let's just call it 39 to round it up. And then that can escalate by 8% and be a 5-year deal max. Now, the challenge is that you hear Steve Kerr talk. He's like not entirely sure that Kuminga and Jimmy fit together on the court, and that the change to Jimmy sort of maybe marginalized what Kuminga is on this team. But also Jimmy and Steph are only here for 2 years, at least by contract. So is this something that the Warriors are going to stop after 2 years, reset?
Well, and Mike Dunleavy Jr., Eric, sorry to interrupt you, but he actually was asked about that. Is this a 2-year plan? And he clarified and said, no, the way they see it is this is a 1-year plan. And even though you're right, all the contracts for Steph, for Dre, for Jimmy expire in 2 years. That's not how the front office sees it. And I was incredibly relieved to hear that, because Steph's going to be 39 next year. Jimmy and Dre are going to be turning 37 next year. So I was relieved to hear that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just, in case
a 1-year plan to like win now type thing. Is that
Correct.
what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. And it is like nice, but it's also not wholly truthful. Not to say Mike Dunleavy's like lying or anything like that. It's just, there's a way to spin it. And like they asked Austin Ainge, who's now, has a high position with the Jazz, and they asked him about tanking and things like that. And he said, we're not going to do that this year. You're not going to see that this year. Those are words. They're words. Mike Dunleavy said words. They aren't lies, because there's truth to them. But are they the whole picture? So while, yes, they could focus entirely on the right now, like being the best right now, while also not destroying.
Eric, let me clarify real fast. I don't think he meant like win now, like we're going to give everything up, it's all or nothing. I think what he meant was in terms of the investment for those 3 players, like they're not going to give them 2 years to try to win a championship. I think the insinuation was, look, if this does not lead to a championship, or at least that level of play with these guys, we're not going to give it another chance the following year, is I think the message you're saying, if that makes sense to you.
Sure. And it's just the decisions that have to be made today based on like they want to win with Jimmy, Steph, and Draymond. And they're there for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so you have to decide in terms of Kuminga, is he a part of the long-term future? That's one. They have to consider that. So as much as Dunleavy might say we're only focused on 1 year, if you're only focused on 1 year, then honestly, there's no place whatsoever for Kuminga, if you think about it. Because if the belief is that he doesn't fit with Jimmy and therefore can't start and therefore is in a minimized role, and he thinks maybe he's worth 30 million, maybe the market says he's worth 20, maybe, maybe there's some, but he's probably not that max 30, whatever, 39 or whatever. Then if we're just talking 1 year, if he's not the right fit, then he's not the right fit. And he needs to be shifted into the right fit. If you're going by that logic of this is only 1 year, but it isn't only 1 year. And so you do have to consider like, okay, if it's only 1 year for Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, and you're really only focused on that, you could also transition that into motivation as to why you do keep Kuminga.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't tell us enough, right? That's why I'm saying it's words. It's not lies. But it's not definitively giving us direction.
Correct. I'm trying to say is as more of a messaging to the fan base, right? In terms of the fan base wondering, like, are the Warriors going to be invested with this trio for 2 more years? I think the message was no. we're invested heavily for 1 more year, and if they're going to show their age, then it's time to shift gears and move on. I don't think that had anything to do with Kuminga. I think those are 2 separate.
Well, I mean, it's all tied together, because that's it's ultimately their biggest decision. Because like, unless you're trading Steph, Jimmy, or Draymond, which I'm going to just assume right out the gate is not on the table, and if Giannis somehow became available, I don't think it's just like it's not realistic. I don't think like if Giannis says to the Bucks, I want to trade and I only want to be traded to the Warriors, then sure, there could be a pathway to that. And would you give up Jimmy Butler for Giannis? You probably have a conversation and say, yeah, you're like, if that, but like Do I think that's going to happen? No. Do I think it's in the cards? Do I think the Warriors think that's going to happen? No. So, like we can come up with edge cases for any topic and say like, sure, if A, B, C, and D, but we're not even going to get to A, right? So like, let's not focus on that. The assumption being those three guys, that's what the focus, if it's today, then how do you build when you have what you're spending 60 on Steph, almost 54 on Jimmy, and 26 on Draymond? Right off the bat, you're already heavily invested. Then it's a question of like who fits around them. And if you're now going to pay Kuminga, let's just say 30, let's round it. Like he wants the max, they want 20, maybe it's 27, maybe it's 26, 25, 24. Like what is the market? The challenge is that you make him restricted by giving him a qualifying offer. That's the first step. You do that before July. And that offer is a 1-year deal. For Kuminga will be about $8 million. And so what that translates to is that if they can't negotiate something that solves the long-term issue, the only leverage Kuminga has, if he doesn't get an offer from someone else. So we're talking about a team with cap room, of which there's really only one. Brooklyn, and that's the Nets. Yeah. Right now, the Grizzlies can get to cap room. They probably get to a small amount to use to try to extend Jaren Jackson Jr., renegotiate and extend. The Pistons could trade out of like Isaiah Stewart to get to maybe $30 million in cap room. So let's say that they trade. Are they trading Isaiah Stewart to get a Kuminga? At least I think it was maybe Mark Stein, I think, wrote that there was some interest in Naz Reid and Miles Turner. It sounds like if they traded out of a big, it's to get another big and just change the big, like instead of a tough, short but strong enforcer type, maybe get someone with a different kind of skill set. Like Miles Turner has a different kind of skill set as a shooter, and so does Naz Reid, right? So Stewart did have one good year shooting, relatively low volume. So it's not an assumption that he's going to be that answer. So none of that involves Kuminga or the Warriors, right? So you start going through the list of teams, and like there's no one who really has the money. And the teams that would have to make trades, like trading Stewart and not bringing anything back. So you're trading him, maybe involving the Nets, where they're taking like, a theoretical would be like, Maxey or Gabe Vincent from the, not Tyrese Maxey Kleber, from the Lakers, and Dalton Connect or something to like the Nets, and the Lakers are getting Stewart. You see what I'm saying? And then the Nets get nothing, like a second round pick or something like that. I made it up as a fake trade, sent it to my editors. I'll probably write it at some point. So don't spoil that on the internet. All right. Anyone listening to this, don't spoil that. It's just a theoretical. There's no sourcing to say that that's a deal.
This is all theoretical. Right? Yeah.
All good. But I use that as an example of like the Pistons have to go through steps to open that space. And they would be doing it probably on a pre-existing yes from Miles Turner or Naz Reid or another target. The challenge here is that Kuminga can't do that. He can't give them that yes. I'm not saying Pistons, anybody. Some other team does what I describe to open up the room to pay him. Mm-hmm. He can't say, yes, I will come. What he can say is, yes, I will sign an offer sheet. So he's restricted. He signs an offer sheet. It's a large deal to try to steal him away. And then the Warriors either say, we'll keep you, we'll sign, that's our contract now, or they say, go ahead. But that team having to do those extra steps is doing it on a maybe. They don't know if they're going to successfully do that. And the Warriors have no obligation to communicate what their intentions are, right? They'll just say, we're going to keep him no matter what. Well, I guess you can't technically say that. Like there's some of the rules, but they can leak that, even if they don't say that right. On the record, they can leak it. To a Shams. So I think
the gist, Eric, what I'm getting here is that Kuminga does not have a lot of leverage. This market is not going to be advantageous to him. So it sounds like the Warriors have the upper hand in terms of
100%
leverage in the number.
Yeah, well, like if no one offers anything to him, then including the Warriors, outside of the qualifying offer, then all he has is $8 million to re-sign for 1 year. And then the next year he can go into unrestricted free agency. Your job at that point is to try to raise up your value, but he's also probably no longer a priority for the Warriors.
And that's never happening. That's not a realistic scenario, right?
It has happened before. I wouldn't throw it out. I think it's a real possibility. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. The agents don't want that. The teams don't necessarily want that, because you want to maximize at this point. If he's not your player, if you're not viewing him as a player for you, now he's an asset. People aren't.
And that hypothetical, Eric, is based on the premise that Kuminga is not a high value commodity. And I don't think that's true. I think there is going to be demand for him, even though the market currently is very hijacked, if you will, because of the cap and how few teams have space.
Well, what you get is you start to get into the other alternatives. So it's either the Warriors give him an offer. We're assuming the offer sheet to make him restricted. They give him an actual contract offer. Let's say they offer $20 million a year for 4 years.
Right.
And maybe they compromise, and that's just, they find a number that they can live with, and everyone's maybe not thrilled, but Kuminga's getting, let's say he's getting 80 million or something like that.
Yeah.
Like if you sign an $80 million contract, like as much as, yes, I had hopes that I would sign 150 million or something, it's still $80 million that, you have a lifetime, and maybe he gets a shorter deal because maybe he gets an option or whatever. I mean, if they don't have leverage,
that's the part that again, we're playing a waiting game here right now, in terms of like, we're waiting on actions to be taken before the next steps can be seen. You're absolutely right. I feel like this is just a massive cluster F-bomb that's just waiting to explode. And then we're going to see all these pieces falling after the fact.
I mean, it's a 30-dimension puzzle of
it is.
Right. And it changes every year. Different teams have different positions each year. It's kind of, it's not random because it's predictable. You see where they're going. But then, we do have the kind of like the 8-ball, hey, you traded for Luka that we didn't expect, like with the Lakers. Like there's stuff that comes from out of nowhere. I didn't think they would fire Tom Thibodeau. I knew the issues with Tom Thibodeau. I think he's a great coach. Don't know if he's a great offensive coach, but like I didn't have it that they would fire him, and yet they did. So like there are times I'm surprised. By and large, I at least knew it was on the menu of possibilities, right? Whereas with the Luka thing, I didn't see that even. I mean, I knew that the Lakers wanted him and that was their ultimate goal, but I thought it was like 2-3 years down the road. I didn't think it was, you know what I mean? So there's always something unexpected. But so just walking through the pathways, they give a qualifying offer, they give him an offer sheet. Well, not an offer sheet. They give him an offer that he accepts, and now he's on the team. They can't trade him until January 15th at that point. But they can trade him on that contract. So sometimes a team, instead of letting a guy go, will try to sign him to a contract that they feel they can move, and then they look to move him either in season or maybe next off season. And then the other option is that, like, okay, like as we said, like no deal, no offers. He takes that 1-year qualifying offer, or he gets an offer sheet from Brooklyn, or he gets an offer sheet from someone else who made the room, and then the Warriors are on the clock.
Yes.
The additional option is a sign and trade. And so what that works out to be, and you can argue that this is the most likely outcome. I don't know that a sign and trade is ever likely, though, so it's.
But it sounds like from your perspective, you think that's the likely outcome, though. Is that what you think, that the sign and trade?
It's kind of like an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp. It's like, by definition, like a sign and trade is like very rare and complicated and not something that happens that often. Equally, this may be the most likely path for Kuminga. So it's kind of two things that don't jibe. But the reality is like, if he can't get to a team directly and the Nets don't give him money and the Warriors don't want to give him a real deal, then he could accept the 1-year qualifying offer, which, by the way, if they trade him off of, he has a no trade, not a no trade clause, but implicit no trade ability. So if he takes his qualifying offer, he can block any trade. And
I didn't know that. Is that a new rule, or has that always been there?
No. If he stays for 1 year, anytime you re-sign a player for 1 year, they have the 1-year bird rule. That's something that's been in the system for a long time. Technically, he can give up that right, but he wouldn't. And so, but he would lose his rights regardless. So, like, let's say that you trade him to what's a team above the cap. Let's say that he went to
Boston, hypothetically.
Yeah, Boston, theoretically. Boston would not, they could only re-sign him at 120% of whatever that $8 million is. So he can't get a deal. So his trade value plummets because, one, he can block a trade, and two, any team that trades for him really needs to have cap room. And if in 26, and if they're going to have cap room in 26, why are they why trade for him? Just wait and then sign him and
Yeah.
not give up anything. And then it's like, well, sometimes teams give up stuff they want to give up. So I could come up with a scenario where like a team is giving up stuff they want to give up anyway, and he's traded in season, but it's not a good deal for the Warriors. It's not a good deal for anybody, especially Kuminga, who's taking a short deal. So then you get to the sign and trade, which is like, Boston can't do it because teams above the second apron can't acquire a player via sign and trade. Teams above the first apron cannot take in a player via sign and trade. So right off the bat, any team that is let's say he's adding 30 million or whatever, any team adding 30 million has to send out enough to match the money and stay under that first apron the entire year, get to 14 players, because that's the minimum. You have to get to 14. And if you're not at 14, it's not a legal roster. You can do it for like 2 weeks at a time for 28 days total in the entire year. So there's limitations on that. And so the argument would be, it's a list of teams that is not a long list, but it's I could come up with at least 10, 12 teams that should at least financially be under those lines that won't go in, but then you have teams that like the Hawks that typically don't pay the tax. And so there's a line of these aprons, but like now we have to say, well, what if this trade puts a team not into the apron, but over the tax? Now you look at their history. Are they a team that's willing to pay tax? And now you're cutting off a few more teams. And so like they don't need 5, 6, 7 teams. The Warriors really need 2. As long as you have 2, then you can have some sort of negotiating leverage. But again, their leverage is that they just don't do anything at all, right? Like they don't have to do a sign and trade. So you have to give up enough, but so maybe those teams might just wait till 26. Ultimately, the goal is to try to solve the problem for the Warriors, for Kuminga's representation, for Kuminga the player, and for some other team out there that values him. The goal is to get to a compromise. So, and then there's one last little tidbit is that the Warriors they would have a second apron hard cap if they took anything back for Kuminga. So if you send out Kuminga sign and trade, you have a second apron hard cap if you take anything back, which would be the goal, right? Otherwise, if you're not going to take anything back, I mean, I guess you could take a pick and not like you could technically trade him with no one coming back if like the Nets want, for some reason the Nets want to give you a first round pick. That logic doesn't make any sense. I've been abandoned.
Sorry, man. Keep going. I just had to let my dog out. I apologize.
All right. I said that I've been abandoned. Are you going to cut that part out or leave that in?
No. We'll keep it going. Keep it going. It's okay.
All right. Well, all right. I feel I wasn't sure if I should keep talking or whatever. So I'll get.
No, I'm sorry. I have a dog too. I have this English bulldog, and he's a whole character. And when he's whimpering at me in a corner, and I realize I forgot to open the door. The audience is familiar with Bubba. I even have like a sound effect. My baby.
I have like dog treats here. These are greenies.
No, I only edit things out if it's like absolutely necessary.
Fair enough.
Yep.
All right. So, basically, in a nutshell, like there's a pathway forward through sign and trade, but if you send out Kuminga at say 30 million or 28 million or 25, the Warriors only get credit in outgoing salary for half of that. So if they sent just to make it a nice number, if he signs for 30, then they only get credit for sending out 15. So they can't bring back more than 15 unless they're willing to trigger a first apron hard cap, which given their situation, probably not. So the most you can do is 15.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I feel like that's a rule that a lot of people are bringing up as an impediment to trading Kuminga in a sign and trade scenario. But is the first apron hard cap really that big of a deal? I mean, didn't the Warriors trigger that last year?
Well, it changes year to year, right? Like right now, their projection. So I'm looking at Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, Moses, Buddy, Pods, Jackson Davis, Santos, Post. They have the 41st pick. If they filled up their roster, the rest to 14 with 4 vet minimums, that totals 181. We'll round it. Okay. It's not terrible. It's below the tax by about 7 million. Okay. It's below the first apron by about 15 million. right? So there is that sort of flexibility. If Kuminga was 30 and instead of a vet minimum, you bring back a player making 15 million, right? So I just took out a vet min, I put in 15 million. They're at about 194, about 2 million-ish under that apron. So you have to look out for players with incentives. Like incentives can throw things off. But like, so then it's like we go back to our conversation of like, you have to find the team that is like the baby bear situation. People say like Goldilocks situation, but it's not really a Goldilocks situation. Like Goldilocks was like whatever, but like baby bear was the one who wanted it to be just right. So it's not a Goldilocks situation. It's baby. That bothers me when people say that, just because
it's always a baby though. It's always about the baby.
It's
always.
The baby bear. Like the baby bear needs it just right. If you're a parent, you've done you've done all that, and people say it's it's like a Goldilocks. No, it's not like Goldilocks. Goldilocks was basically breaking and entering and stealing. So that's a whole different situation. She's a felon. This baby bear is just like a particular little child. So, all right. So it has. But if we go through each team and we try to like, okay, well, it can't be these apron teams, and some of these teams with tax aren't going to go into the tax for Jonathan Kuminga. So you start to whittle it down, and then you have to find a team that's willing to send out 15 million that works for the Warriors, or the Warriors don't necessarily have to take anything back, but like that team needs to be able to take in a $30 million player. And if they're taking in sign and trade, there's a first apron hard cap. So that's implicit, but so they can take it. What it was, if it's 30 million, you just divide it by 30 million. So I don't have to do it in my head. 30 million. I left out a zero. 30 million divided by, well, let's just subtract 250. Give me a second here.
It's all good. We're real math in real time. I love it.
Okay, so that's divided by 1.25. Make sure I did that right. So a team taking in Kuminga would have to either have 23.8, and is that 30 million? And again, the number, if you make it lower, it's a different number. But we're saying 30 just for argument's sake. That team has to send out, either have 20, well, they would have to have 30 million in cap. Technically, they would have to have 29,750 in cap room to be able to take him in, or they need to have outgoing 23.8 million in salary. We just said that the Warriors can only take in 15. So the team is sending out 23.8 and the Warriors can't take in 23.8. So 8 point whatever needs to go somewhere else. So you start to like, okay, well, now it's a 3-team trade. And so not only now you got to go through that little, the algorithm of like, finding a team that wants Kuminga, finding a team that doesn't have apron issues, that doesn't have a tax issue or doesn't mind the tax issue, that now, has 23.8 to send out, and another team that has the ability to take in 23.8 million or 50 or 8 million of it or whatever, and is willing to do so because now they're taking on 8 million in salary. Like you can see how like it gets harder and harder to narrow that down into a specific trade, knowing that also like Kuminga has a say. He's got to, I think at this point, any team that's offering him 30 million in the NBA, he's going to say yes to. It doesn't matter if they're the worst team or the best team, or if you say, well, we have like 6 players ahead of you at your position. Sure. It's still $30 million. Like at that point, especially if it's a multi-year deal. So I do think there's a solution. I haven't, Bleacher asked me to write on it, and I will write on it. And, it's not the top one. I've got some other stories, but at some point they've asked me to do sort of like, what's the best.
Oh, I can't wait to read that. Please let me know when it's published. Yeah. Let me know when I'll let you know when I think it through, because I haven't gone through, really what I prepare all my books before the lottery, and then I prepare everything. Then we have the lottery, and the lottery was not too long ago. Gosh, it's a blur because it's all a blur. Yeah.
I came back from the lottery and then went. After the lottery is the combine, which is in Chicago. So I was there for the lottery, which was a blast. Combine is great. Just talking to networking.
Were you there for that? You went?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
That needs to be on my itinerary at some point, because I hear that's the event where all the behind the scenes stuff.
Well, I mean, for me, I love the G League Showcase probably the most. Well, I mean, to be honest, I love Summer League. So like for me, the most fun I have in the year is at Sports Business Classroom, right, in Vegas, like, because that is, that is like where I'm executing what it is that I do. Then when it comes to like where I don't have the same level of responsibility, G League Showcase is awesome in Orlando because there's no fans there. There's just some games, and there's a lot of executives and agents and people sitting around with G League basketball, which is fine, but it's not like they're enraptured by it. Mostly they're like, hey, please come sit with me and talk with me. And then the Chicago Combine, there's a gym where there's stuff going on and there's a million people, and you could talk to different executives, talk to different people in the industry. And then there's a hotel across like the, whatever they got, like a way, like a bridge or something like that. And there's just like a lot of people just there. And so, you just hang out in the lobby area or where there's a little loungy area, and you end up talking to a zillion people. So there's, a lot of what we teach at our program in Las Vegas is about networking. And so that's a big part of, what I do. And then also, for whatever reason, I've done this long enough and have at least some level of value add that I can have a conversation with someone, with a team or an agent, and maybe give them a perspective that maybe they didn't have, or at least I can have a conversation about things that maybe they can't talk casually with anybody with, because not everyone knows what they're talking about. And it's kind of like if you're like a hyper nerd about a specific like animation, like an anime, or like, and this is like you spend and no one is into it. You find someone who is into it as much as you are. Now you have a ton to talk about.
Oh, you're geeking out. Absolutely. Yeah. Big time on that.
So go ahead.
Eric, real fast, just to summarize the Kuminga thing, because we've spent so much time on this already, and I have a few other questions I want to get ask you before you go. To summarize, I feel like if the reports are true a year ago, and I can't remember who reported this, I think it was Anthony Slater, that the Warriors offered Kuminga an extension valued at $30 million per year. He wanted 35 per year. They were off by 5 million per, I think 20 million total. And Kuminga turned that down. And I think in hindsight, that was a massive mistake, because something tells me the market is not going to give him 35 million per this offseason. And if he somehow gets 30, he's lucky. I mean, can the Warriors even offer him 30 million? Are they even allowed to?
Yeah, no, they can. They just, they can go over these aprons, keeping their own players. The more you spend, the fewer tools you have. Like, if they just let him go, they can use their full mid-level exception, sign a player for about 14 million. Okay. Or they can spend a little bit more on, I mean, I'd have to do the math. I'd have to figure out what they can spend on Kuminga to get to the taxpayer mid-level. The taxpayer mid-level is a much smaller one. They are projected to be currently about 27 under that. So if you're paying Kuminga like 8 million and he only takes that 1 year, then you still have the taxpayer mid-level. And like there are other moves they can make. They can trade other players, but realistically, just in terms of money, the only ones making any money of any note outside of their big three are Moody and Buddy, right? So like Moody is 12-ish, Buddy's 9-ish, and Pods is 4. So like the value that he brings on the court based on price, there would have to be a really strong, compelling reason to move him, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like you can argue, okay, maybe they can upgrade Moody. Not saying they can or should. I'm not picking on Moody at all. But there's not much money elsewhere to shed is really the point.
And this is year one of Moody's extension too. That's kicking.
Taxpayer mid-level is 5.7. So they either have minimums. If you're paying Kuminga, you just have minimums to supplement the team. So you're basically last year's team, hopefully healthy with Jimmy from day one. So, and then you can keep Pat Spencer, you can keep Kuminga, keep Looney, keep Peyton, and spend up until you're satisfied.
GP2 actually, no, he's an unrestricted free agent. You're saying if he comes back for the veteran minimum,
they could pay all these guys. No, they could pay them whatever. Like they could just spend on Looney. They have the full bird, on Kuminga full bird, Peyton full bird. They could pay these guys max. Not that they will. They could pay Pat Spencer up into the early bird, which will be just under 14. And I'm not saying they'll pay him that much, but they can, is my point. And they have they can give minimums to Taron Armstrong, Braxton Key. if they want. These are the players they have the rights to. There are other guys technically from previous years, but
Right.
we'll leave Matt Barnes off. Like technically, they still have Matt Barnes rights. Just technically,
that's crazy. And hopefully Matt Barnes is going to come on the show soon. Side note: I've been trying for a long time, and hopefully that's going to happen this summer. But let me. Do you know from your screen in front of you or your calculating tool, whatever you're using, that is clearly very valuable software? I imagine. What is the number for the Warriors to re-sign hypothetically Kuminga at, where they don't lose the ability to use one of their mid-levels? Is there a number, or are they screwed no matter what?
Well, no. I mean, if you just plug in instead of a vet, let's say you do JK at his qualifying offer, which is 7.976.
But he's not. I want to be realistic though. Like I highly doubt that's going to happen. What if let's say
if they can't reach the deal,
$20 million a year? Is there any hope of them still having the flexibility of adding a mid-level or doing anything?
So if I just plug in 20, right, they're at about 198.
Okay.
Which is over the first apron. The second apron projects to be about 208. So then they would have the taxpayer mid-level. So I plug that in there.
Okay. All right. And here's another question, Eric, if you don't mind. No, okay. So that makes now the picture in my head.
You don't have Looney in there, and you don't have GP. So are you keeping Looney?
Eric, who cares? I mean, those are two guys who were grossly overpaid. Those are two guys who,
Looney, I think that when Looney is, I just think that there's an undervalue of Looney here. I don't think you're paying him a lot, but let's say you're paying him $5 million. Okay, let's give him $5 million for Looney. You're giving JK Kuminga 20. You're trying to use the taxpayer mid-level. You are at 204, so you're fine. You've let GP go, or technically you still could pay GP. Let's say $5 million. Let's see. Can I get $5 million in there?
Because Eric, behind the scenes, and I don't know if you're, and again, I know you're very connected, but the Warriors are like literally everything I do. And so a lot of the information I have, I when I bring up with other people, they're like, really? Or, it's very esoteric, unfortunately. And I do my best to enlighten the audience here. But behind the scenes, and maybe you're aware of this, there has been a struggle, like a power struggle. And there was a brief proxy war where you have a front office and you have a coaching staff with two very different visions, complete, almost opposite sides of the spectrum. And players like Looney and GP2, the reason why I don't know if they're going to come back is because the front office views pieces like that as crutches that Steve Kerr relies on, that oftentimes he'll give minutes to over young pieces that the front office would like to see playing. And this season was a perfect example of that. Like you saw Kuminga's minutes, a lot of nights diminished or completely eliminated. DNPs.
Warriors were also killing it though before they got hurt. Like when I before Steph got hurt, like when I was talking at Lakers and Clippers both talking about matchups, the one team that no one wanted to face was the Warriors. They almost rather face Denver than Golden State, because at least Denver, they don't have the depth. Steph is just too scary. Jimmy has changed them. Draymond, like I was looking at the Lakers versus them. I watched that game and it's like, shoot, like how many players, the Lakers ran into a much bigger team in Minnesota. It was a whole nother issue, but the Warriors have always struggled with the size of like AD and LeBron. Right. So now you have Draymond and Butler tag teaming the combination of Luka and LeBron, and like, okay, like, there's Austin and stuff, but like, this is a tough matchup for the Lakers. Not many teams have that kind of, and then Looney was like, Lakers would shoot. I mean, I should probably put Lakers on the list, Looney on the list of guys that the Lakers should just get, because
maybe.
Yeah, like he's not a lob threat.
I'm just saying there is a huge issue with the Warriors behind the scenes. Like Steve Kerr's.
If it's 1 year though, if it's 1 year, and this is the 1 year.
But Joe Lacob's always been someone who looks beyond just 1 year, right? The two timeline thing was designed after what the Spurs did. Like the Spurs won their 5th championship because young pieces were growing and developing. Kawhi
Sure.
Leonard got the finals MVP that year. That is Joe Lacob's vision. And Bob Myers was a part of that before he realized Steve Kerr wanted nothing to do with that. And he's like, F this. I mean, what's the point of being a GM and he said this publicly. He said, what is the point of adding players if your coach isn't going to play them? And he quit right after that. It's been a struggle for a few years. Steve Kerr's days are absolutely numbered here. I think he got egg in his face for his usage of Kuminga or lack thereof. That Houston Rockets series should not have gone 7 games, Eric. They had that series locked up in 5. And who knows if Stephen Curry injures that hamstring if you're not pushing him 2 extra games, playing him over 40 minutes, a 37-year-old in a game 7. There were mistakes made, and Steve Kerr has very serious trust issues with a lot of players. Like, he's very peculiar with the type of individual that he considers a fit in his system. Right. And in his mind, Kuminga wasn't a fit. And that was lunacy to me. That's been lunacy to me for years, that you have this talent that Steve Kerr just doesn't like playing. And it represents, to me at least, a much bigger issue, which is that you don't see players ever developing under Kerr systems because he's all about just in the moment winning and what works in this specific moment. He does not have, like, he doesn't apply vision to his coaching.
But I think there's a commonality between like a Ben Mathurin and a Kuminga, where they're similar style players. They're both really like good with the ball and creating for themselves, but they aren't like 5, 6, 7 assist guys. And they, like they kind of need to be the option to really maximize who they are. And a young player like that kind of needs to go through years of like learning how to incorporate what they have to then become like, okay, I'm a good player. Now I'm a winning player. And I don't know that Kuminga has that in this environment and would ever have that if they're going to continue with Steph and all that. And just like Mathurin, like if you take Mathurin off of the Pacers, he's probably going to be averaging 20 points a game. I don't know that they're going to be winning a lot initially. Whereas on this Pacers team, he's got more of a bit role because he doesn't really, like it's not about youth or whatever. It's just that like the way that they play, he's more of a individual scorer, just like Kuminga is more of an individual scorer. So it's just like Kuminga is an awkward fit. He's just an awkward fit on a
depends on who you ask. Depends on who you ask, Eric. Like Draymond Green on his show just last week admitted he literally pushed back against his own head coach, saying, I didn't see enough for me to come to a conclusion that he doesn't fit. Like that is, it's a very subjective thing. And again, Steve Kerr's the boss. To me, that's insanity. That you look at a talent like Jonathan Kuminga and think to yourself, he doesn't fit. And he's literally like, like now trying to evoke Sean Marion as a comparison. It's like Jonathan Kuminga has said from the very beginning, like he looked up to Kobe Bryant. He aspires for that level of greatness. Again, that's a whole other show.
Right, but trying to be, he needs to be in this version a role player, and he that's not how he envisions himself.
Well, but again, you don't draft a player like Kuminga and expect him to be a role player. That is where the mistake I think was made.
Well, I mean,
Moses Moody, okay, maybe like that can be someone he's going to turn into. Jonathan Kuminga was not drafted to be a role player.
He was drafted because they had the high pick because of all the injuries. So they got the best player that they could find in that moment. And they chose somebody thinking beyond Steph.
Correct.
The problem is, not a bad problem, Steph is still Steph, right?
And again, Steph has never once said Kuminga is a bad fit. The only
doesn't
person
matter what he says. It's not. It doesn't. I don't care what Draymond and Steph say. Like I love them as players and people.
Why do you
like,
care what Steve Kerr has to say? Why do you?
I don't care what he says either.
Okay,
I don't.
Okay. So what do you think Kuminga's a bad fit?
I'm just watching and I'm like, I know, like if there's a style of play, this team is going to be about getting Steph, the kind of Steph shots that Steph gets. That automatically means you have to play a certain way. And then Jimmy plays a different way. And the way that Jimmy plays can work with Steph, but it's hard to have a Jimmy and then Jimmy doing what Kuminga would be doing. But Kuminga can't defend like Jimmy. Kuminga can't, and you could say like he can't. I don't agree. I mean, it's a brain issue. It's not even.
I push back hard on that, Eric. I push back hard on that.
So I think just a second. It's a brain development issue. Not criticizing Kuminga. It's a youth thing, right? Like he doesn't have. And you could say, well, if Kerr had integrated him earlier, his brain would have developed. And this is not in any way a slight on who he is as an individual. I'm talking about any young player, any 22, 3, 4, 5-year-old. developing
But Eric,
into.
I mean, I'm pushing back on that notion. I don't think Kuminga is a low IQ type player. Is what
Oh,
I'm
I didn't
saying.
say it's not an IQ. I'm not. I'm
Well, what do
talking
you mean
about
by
every
brain
young
then?
player.
What do you
All young.
insinuate?
That's an experience thing, not
Okay.
IQ at all. As zero
But
IQ.
Podziemski has
No, I'm
2
not
years
saying
left.
Kuminga has zero IQ. I'm saying
But
this is zero about IQ. This is all about the
yes.
brain development, which I had to go through. You had to go through because at some point you didn't know how to I was going to say something a little worse, but like you didn't know how to feed yourself. You didn't know how to dress. And eventually your brain developed and you became an adult. Right.
Yeah.
Well, like, having been around players for as long as I have, like they come in as, 20-ish, 22, and there's a certain amount of maturity that, every so often, like someone like Halliburton comes in and they're just like way ahead of the curve in terms of brain development. But it's really like the ability to think the game. That's in the playoffs where it's at the highest level where that matters. And it's why teams that are like super athletic, but not as like, so in some cases, then it's like they don't have the basketball IQ. Those are like seasoned players who are just like, and some guys like Luka comes in and it's just like his ability to understand the game is off the charts. I'm not saying Kuminga is not smart in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying if you had started him on the track, and this would be following your argument of letting him be himself from the get-go, then by this year 4, that brain development would have happened. But since he's been kept in bubble wrap and not played, so I think it's like the problem was 2-3 years ago. And last year he had a good year, right? And then this year he got hurt, and then Jimmy came
the
and
injury derailed him. Yeah.
Right. But again, like that's not anyone's fault that an injury derailed him. And then they basically traded for someone at his exact position who is a star player and who they view, whether you agree or not, as a better choice.
Well, and again, it's not just me. It's also the owner. I mean, Joe, I don't know if you saw Joe
They wouldn't
Lacob
have greenlit the Jimmy Butler trade if they wanted Kuminga instead of Jimmy Butler. Like,
repeat that. I'm sorry. I missed.
They wouldn't have greenlit getting Jimmy Butler if they didn't want him. The ownership is the one who traded for him.
Agreed. But
right.
where I think that there's at least a communication failure, and I think this is a part of the Warriors' issue, and I don't know if you agree or not, is why trade for Jimmy Butler only to then realize after the fact that Jonathan Kuminga
knew that they'd already been going in a different direction on Kuminga anyway. That's been pretty well known. And
no, that's not true, Eric. That's not true. He was literally starting games for them in December before he got hurt.
Yeah, but like
he was their leading scorer or the second leading scorer.
But once his contract demands were what they were, they started going in a different direction. Once he was asking for that amount.
I don't know what do you mean by different direction, because Kuminga was literally starting games for them, averaging the month of December.
Starting in the absence of an alternative.
No one. There was no absence of anyone. He literally, Draymond Green,
who else
went to
was
the
going
bench,
to start, is what I'm saying.
Draymond Green went to the bench. Kuminga was starting, and for the month of December,
the context was the team was dying on the vine, and they tried to shake it up. That's what happened, right? Like, remember how bad the Warriors were?
Yes.
Remember when Steph was saying, like, man, I didn't realize we hadn't, what was it, like a fourth quarter lead, we hadn't overcome any of them all year, or something like that.
That was like, right? Well, that was a good excuse me, that was a good month after the Kuminga injury. Right. But when Kuminga got hurt, the Warriors were 18-16. They still had a winning record. The month of December was the first time in Kuminga's entire career where he had a decent sample size of 30 minutes or more. He never plays. That's been the entire issue and my point of consternation that thankfully Warriors ownership agrees with me in this case. I like, and Eric, and I'm sorry, this is turning a moment of discourse here, but I feel like the NBA community as a whole has this reverence and deference to Steve Kerr that if he makes a decision, it's just automatically right.
He's not even on my radar.
Okay, but you're saying some things about Kuminga that are not true. Like, for example, them moving in a different direction. No, he was getting
that's sourced information. Now, whether they continue in that direction is a different story. I don't go off of what a coach says. I don't go off what players say, but I do talk to other teams and the conversations that they have, and I talk to agents. Now, they may absolutely continue a relationship with Kuminga, but the contract demands put it in a position where they are going in a different direction.
Yeah, well, it didn't help either side, I think, for them.
And so at that point, you're playing Kuminga as much as possible, because at this point, you're thinking about what the pathway out of Kuminga is. You're not thinking about the pathway forward. So there are two things that are happening. If a player is getting more time and is getting showcased and is playing great, that might not be because of anything more than the decision to make sure that we're raising the value of that player.
Do you think conspiracies like that are happening?
That's not a conspiracy. These are front offices. That's not a conspiracy.
But a front office is not controlling a player's minutes.
The coach and the front office are not always on the same page.
Correct.
Certainly Denver will tell you that. Like
yes,
Calvin Booth and Mike
certainly the Warriors will tell you that, as evidenced by the Jimmy Butler trade.
There's a certain level of communication with coaches and conversations that can happen daily, weekly, monthly. It varies, and there can be push and pull, and the coach will try certain things or they'll reject certain things. And if there is a strong contentious relationship, as we saw in Denver, at some point they just like, you know what, screw it, we're going to fire both of you, right? So we don't know the pathway that this will go. We have an idea, but there's a lot of things. There's, like if there's a lot that goes into these things. It's not conspiracy. It's a front office making decisions. Like, for instance, the Utah Jazz saying they're not going to tank anymore. The coach was never tanking. They just traded away all the players that would ever give him a chance to win, right? So, like, there's a lot that goes into it. Or, like, is it a conspiracy that they had Lauri Markkanen sign the contract the exact day that made it so he couldn't be traded?
Then, Eric, I will push back and say your source is incorrect, that the Warriors front office had an edict to manage Kuminga in a way that
those are not my words. That's not an edict. I'm saying they're looking.
What are you saying? I don't know what you're saying exactly.
They're saying that there's a push in one direction and another direction. They are exploring at that point. Once he's asking for too much money, now the front office is looking at the alternatives, right? They're looking at, okay, we like this player, but we don't like him at $35 million or whatever he was asking. So at this point, you're starting to plan for his exit.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you're not just going to exit because things change and things work out.
Right.
So at this point now, you want to make sure his value is high. You want to have a positive environment for him to see if he can succeed in your thing and if you can work it out, but also consider that now we're building up his value to trade him. So there's a lot of it, there might have been a world in which they traded him for Jimmy, but at the time Kuminga was hurt and didn't have a good year, and he wasn't really a part of that. And you could say, oh, well, they were successful in getting that deal done without Jimmy because they want to keep Jimmy. Then maybe that's the fact. Maybe the fact is they wanted to do Jimmy, it didn't work out, and because not Jimmy, they wanted to do Kuminga and Jimmy, and it didn't work out. So there's a lot and often these kind of dichotomies are in the owner's head, in the GM's head, in the front office conversations. And these fights internally, and not in a negative way, fights, these arguments, these conversations, these debates are a healthy part of discourse of a team. But the Warriors are looking at a future without Kuminga, and they are looking at a future with Kuminga. Those two things can be true. And the decisions made along the way, with Kerr in some level involved, and with Kerr in some level doing whatever the hell he wants, because he's not going to do whatever front office tells him. Correct. I don't know where that line is. There's a line somewhere. Some coaches will do anything that a front office says. Some will do nothing. Malone was the do nothing. Young coach who's just happy to have a job.
Yeah,
he's going to do whatever, right? When Darvin Ham got the job with the Lakers, do whatever he was happy to finally get the job. Do whatever they wanted, right? I don't know the exact percentage of, if we say 50-50 is Kerr listens to half of everything they say and ignores the other half. I don't know if he's at 100 or at 75.
That is the burning question, Eric. I think that's my burning question, is what is the communication between Kerr and the front office?
I don't know the answer on how well. I haven't heard anything to say that there's some, something bubbling. As far as I know, Kerr will be here for the next 2 years with Curry, Butler, and Draymond. But if this next season is a disaster, who the hell knows, right?
That could change, yes.
And I don't think there's anything to go off, yes, to me, the Rockets are, I said this to anyone who listened, very few did. The Rockets are going to give anyone who they face a really difficult series. I didn't think it would go 7, but I'm like, this is a long series. I was saying Lakers because they almost played them, and the Warriors, because last week of the season, it was like shuffling so much. They were 2, and then I think the Lakers finally got where it was either the Warriors or, right? Is that where the Lakers got to? I don't even remember anymore.
First round. It was a first round exit. They lost to Minnesota.
Okay, so no, the Lakers almost had to play the Warriors or the Rockets.
At the end, the Warriors lost. And again, this is where, Kerr DNP's Kuminga those final 3 games of the regular season. They lost to the Clippers. They lost another game as well that was big. And so they fell to the 7 seed which was a missed opportunity for the Warriors
Yeah,
because,
there was
like you
one
said, they
game
would
they
have put the
lost
Lakers in
that
the first
killed
round.
them.
What's
Yeah,
up?
there's one game they lost. There was one in particular. I think it was the Spurs or something like that.
Spurs. It was the Spurs.
Yeah,
Yes,
because it was the Nuggets the year before. Same thing. Spurs played spoiler, threw things off, and
correct.
it messed up seedings.
And Kuminga got DNP'd in that game. And Eric, just to let you know, I have not been covering the Nationals side of the NBA much. But I have been covering the Warriors for 25 years professionally. I have some connections of my own to this organization, and I'm lucky that my sources are trustworthy and valid. It's a huge reason why this program continues to grow and is successful with what it is. And what I could tell you with certainty is that the front office, and when I say front office, is primarily Lacob, loves Kuminga. Like, they didn't come to an agreement when it comes to money, clearly, right? But 35 versus 30 million, the fact that the Warriors offered him 30 million tells me that they did value him, but Kuminga, and I'm guessing his agent, looked at what Jalen Green made.
I advise a lot of agents, and it's restricted free agency. Like, if you were to say, like, we're going to rebuild the NBA rules from scratch, one of the things that the NBPA would fight for almost the most would be getting rid of restricted free agency, because it is they would love to get rid of the draft too, but that's a different story. The PA
the what? The track?
The draft. Yeah, the draft.
Just get rid of it?
Yeah. You come in as a free agent. Well, why it's in what world do you not have the right to work for the employer?
I'm not
saying I agree with them, but that's their point of view.
I'm not defending the premise, but to actually get rid of it in reality, I think is a tall task.
Well, it's an event for the NBA.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to get rid of it. It's something they sold to the broadcasters, and I don't think that that's changing.
No.
And I don't think the owners wouldn't if I were the owners, I don't know. I'd have to think the owner side of, like, the value of restricted free agency. But ultimately, it's a terrible situation, terrible position to be in. If I was advising Kuminga's agent last year, I would have mapped out the cap room projection, which is basically two teams at the time. It was like the Wizards or the Spurs, and then the Spurs commit, like, it was maybe 4 or 5 teams. And I was like, this is why it'll probably only be 2 teams. And then the Wizards did Middleton and Smart, and it took them out. And then Detroit had I could point out how Detroit may not have that much. And then that's even before Cade's money jump, because he hit the 30% incentive. So, like, I would have explained to them, like, realistically, if the Nets don't want you, now I would say to them, like, if you know that the Nets will give you an offer, then that's the max or whatever, sure. But if you don't know that, and you can't quote know anything in this league, so quickly with the Knicks is a good example of a player who got a successful case of telling the Knicks, I want $5 million more than what you're offering, and I'm going to not take your deal. And then they traded him to Toronto, and he got the deal that he wanted. That's so rare. And when quickly happened, that's just like, for an agent who may not, and I don't know Kuminga's agent or anything like that. I didn't even look up who I forget who.
Well, Kuminga's agent, and just to add some context there, Kuminga's agent is the one who complained publicly 2 seasons ago when Kuminga was benched for the second half of that Nuggets game that the Warriors blew a 20-point lead. That's where all the rift started, I guess. But it was Kuminga's agent who publicly complained. It was Kuminga's agent who turned down $30 million a year.
The rift, ultimately, whatever it is that they weren't paying him enough. And the problem is that, like, if you look
this
at
last year,
quickly is what you would call an inside straight draw. If you know poker, and I do. So, like, if you hit,
I'm a gambler. I'm a riverboat gambler.
Right. Let's say that you have like going low, like you have 2, 3, and you have 5, 6, and you're gambling that a 4 comes up to get a low straight, which may not even win. Right. The odds of you hitting that are low. However, sometimes you hit it. And when you hit it, sometimes that could be the worst thing, because you probably didn't win that much. And now the next time you're like, well, I hit it last time. So quickly is an inside straight draw that hit. And if you're Kuminga and you're not, like, are you kidding me that you couldn't, like, 30 million? Because what you're doing is well, this is the problem. And this is how it's not just because you're like, oh, he'll earn it the next year. But you don't understand that the moment that you have that discrepancy, just like with the Knicks, they're like, well, quickly you're out. Kuminga head down that path. Once you're asking too much and it doesn't make sense, now the team has to start thinking about your exit. Once they start thinking about your exit, they are no longer putting you in the same position to succeed to the best of your individual potential. They're going to put team over developing you, and that's what happened with Kuminga. So that's what I'm saying. Like, whether they, like I said, this dichotomy of goal is inherent in a front office. They should I mean, if you have everybody agreeing, then you don't have a healthy front office. If everyone's agreeing on the same thing, everyone thinks the same thing, then you're not getting anywhere.
You're the Cowboys. Yeah, you're the Cowboys.
Well, the Warriors should have this level of discourse, and their ownership. There's a lot of owners who love a certain player and they bond with the family, but at some point, like, the front office explains to them, like, this is the situation, and at some point, an owner has to let go of that, and typically the best owners do. And if Lacob is a good owner, which I would say, based on the track record of the Warriors being successful, maybe that's just he lucked into Steph, but whatever. Like you can't deny the results, right?
Exactly.
They have had one of the most successful organizations of this century, right?
I try to remind the fan base all the time that you could do so much worse than Joe Lacob. I personally,
well, I don't know. I don't know if he's good. I'm just saying agnostically. I don't know if he's good or bad. I'm simply saying the results. If we go off of the results, which is the only thing that we have that is fact, is the result.
Yep.
Then
yes, sir.
We have to consider that he has done a good job, at least based on result. Now, it's possible they've won despite him. Certainly possible. But agnostically, I don't know that, and I don't have the evidence, and I'm not going off of any sort of intel. I do know that his argument that they shouldn't pay tax for Steph and Clay makes no sense. If you go back,
we had a fun discourse about that last year.
Yeah,
and again, my whole thing is, Eric, is the integrating a system that rewards a team paying their draft picks without getting penalized for it. I guess, like, the reason why some people are in support of that is the continuity of a player staying with the team long term, right? And if you value that, then that's your argument.
But there's no reason that can't happen. You can still have that continuity. There's no reason not to have that continuity.
Well, the Thunder are going to be faced with this problem in a few years, right? Maybe even sooner.
So maybe they lose Isaiah Hartenstein, not one of their draft guys.
How about 2 years from now when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, just those three alone?
Sure. And the cap,
so you're
going to
start losing all these other. So you're just saying, who cares, right? You're just saying
they
tough,
can afford
right?
it. They're not even gonna. They might not even be in the second apron at that point. They might be. The cap is going up 10% a clip. You start to lose Isaiah Joe. You start to lose guys who
Wallace,
are
Wiggins,
the peripheral guys. Like, at some point, Alex Caruso is over 30. So does Alex Caruso finish out his deal? I thought that was a little too rich for Alex. I love Alex. Know him personally. Thrilled that he got it, but they gave him a little bit more than I thought probably I should have, but, like, you probably trade out of him in his last year. So the guys you have to start thinking about replacing are Hartenstein, Caruso. They have to make a decision on Dort. But you can pay Chet, you could pay Shea, and you can pay Jalen Williams for the next 5-6 years, all max, no problem. That's not an issue.
So you're saying the system currently as constructed is fine because a team can still keep its core 2 or 3, and you're fine with, like, the rest of the players moving on.
I mean, there are flaws in the system, but I think that if you look at the whole, the answer that Lacob came up with, basically, it has to come with a promise that we will also stop spending. That's not what he's saying. If you're saying, if he says we shouldn't be taxed on Steph and Clay and we accept a lower cap, sure, now we can have a conversation. But if you're saying we shouldn't be, like, when they won the championship, they couldn't afford GP. He left to Portland.
Well, they actually could have. They cheaped out on that one.
They
legally they could have. Legally they could have, but it would have been a massive luxury tax. And
right. You're basically paying for a guy who's probably worth $5-6 million. You're probably paying 30. So
correct, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you then, this is my point, if you are not being taxed on Steph, Clay, etc., now you can afford GP. Now you can afford Otto Porter, who obviously got hurt.
And I like that. You're saying you don't like that. So you like the current system.
You like that, but if you do that, now every player loses 10% of their money every year, and the cap starts to decrease every year because the players are.
You're going like
players are getting too much money.
Whole split and the
it has to be. The NBA has a hard cap. The macro level, it's 50-50.
Right? No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right.
51. So if you keep if the Warriors pledge to also not spend, because that's the issue. If you're not going to pay tax, the reason you're not paying tax is because you're stopping your spending. It means the system's working. Unfortunately, it wasn't working well enough, and players are only getting 91% of your money because of teams like the Warriors. Now the Warriors dropped out of the mix. So, but the teams like the Celtics, even the Timberwolves, the Knicks, like you start going through the list of teams. I don't have actually I do have my tax numbers. So they're kind of crazy. I get the logic of it. And I've had this conversation with NBA executives, people in high positions who are not thinking it through. They're like, yeah, I kind of get it. And I'm like, well, first of all, the draft isn't sacrosanct. Like if you find an Austin Reeves and turn him into a player, or an Alex Caruso, like why are you not being awarded for doing something special there? If you make a great trade, why is that not special? What about Kobe Bryant? He wasn't drafted by the Lakers. People think that he was, but he wasn't. He was drafted by a different team. He was traded. He was drafted by Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
So does that mean that was it the Hornets? Yes, Charlotte. Yeah, it was the Hornets back then, right? Yeah. I get so confused because
I think wasn't Vlade involved in that trade? Vlade Divac?
Yeah, it was the Charlotte Hornets before they were the Pelicans.
Or whatever. That was a long time ago. Yeah, you're right.
I don't know. I forget. I don't know. It's
you're right. No, I think that's true. That was the version back then moved to New Orleans, and then they did the expansion Bobcats,
something like that. But Boston, $270 million in tax, and then the Knicks about 40, Phoenix 234. That's the other one. I knew there was one I was missing. Phoenix and Boston are costing, and also Cleveland at 112. They're costing basically players real money by overspending.
Bless you, Brad.
Actually, was that last year? No, that was last. I'm sorry, that was this year. That's my projection. So last year was Boston 270. Oh no, that's correct. I haven't.
Boston's a mess. Yeah, Boston's in a huge mess right now.
But I'm talking about it from the perspective of why players are getting 91% of the money. Some of that is the regional networks struggling. So it's not all on the team. Some of it is situational, but some of it is that like, and the Celtics, I talked to the Celtics, but they were like, if we don't, even if we repeat, like it would be nice if they didn't know who was, my friends with the team didn't know who the new owners would be at the time. It was before the sale. They're like, we hope the new owners will give us a chance if we win to try to three-peat. But if we don't win, we're going to, have to start like the Al Horfords, the Drews, the Porzingis, the expensive ones. We're going to have to start to get out of those guys because the tax rates start to climb starting this year. So, it's a very complex system. It's not a perfect system. I could point out flaws all areas. So don't be like, oh, he's loving the system. I'm just saying you have to curb spending. Otherwise, it's money coming out of the pockets of the players. And the response of the system is that if there's an overpayment, it lowers the cap. Part of the reason why the cap is lower this year is because the teams the year before overpaid. And so you have to, if they got 90, what was it, 94? I think they got 94. Let's say it was 5%. Let's say they got 5% of their money back. The cap is actually lower this year because of that. And now it's going to be even lower next year. Now, next year is also a weird year because of the TV deal coming in. So we have offsetting pressures. We have downward pressure and a massive up pressure. The up pressure I heard will last for 2 years. I don't know. That's what someone told me, someone in a high position, that the cap is just going to go up 10%, 10%. After that, it'll start to normalize. So, maybe it doesn't matter if you overspend for the next 2 years. Maybe this is the 1 year to overspend on Kuminga. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see.
Do you get offers from teams like consistently? Because I imagine you would. I could be wrong on this, but are teams routinely reaching out to you going, we need a cap guy?
I mean, it's more, I do a little bit more work like that on the agent side. The team side, there's some structural issues where it has to be built on a long relationship of trust before someone's coming to me, someone in the media, someone who writes stories for Bleacher Report. And, like I don't have a contract. I'm not like on an NDA. So it has to be something built off of years. And I've had conversations through there's been, an opportunity where I, accepted a position the same year that a team offered a position. I had just bought a house. And it was like, I mean, sure, it'd be a dream, but like I also have another dream that I'm living that like, so like you sort of,
mortgages and family, Eric, they complicate things.
Life is about difficult choices. My kids are basically done with. In theory, we're free of having kids at our home starting in September.
Congratulations,
which is great. Yeah. But like that doesn't mean I'm just going to get up and move to any city, right? Like I have. It's one of those things where it's easier to work for agents because they're not localized. They may be in a different, they could be in Atlanta, they could be in Houston or like anywhere. And I can still do the same level of work that I would do because their job is less like in a team, you need to be there on the ground.
I do love the fact that there are at least agents who are taking advantage of that brain of yours, because the knowledge you have, it's very important. Very few people have it. There's a reason why you're a professor. I wish I was 20 years younger so I could attend your class. Do you mind? I've had you for so long, and this has been a great show. Before I leave you, because again, I'm stealing your time right now, and I hope I can repay it at least by promoting the business class that you host. And why don't I share that screen again real fast? Before I get to the listener questions, a few people have some questions for you that I'm to get to, but quick break just to showcase the Sports Business Classroom. Bobby Marks of ESPN, yourself, Eric Pincus, Yossi Goslin, Keith Smith of Spot Track are all part of this. If you go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com, July 13th through 19th, it's in the middle of Summer League. Anything I missed on that, Eric?
Well, I would say that, you mentioned like 20 years older or younger or whatever. Like, I would say that a large part of our class range from like just finishing college or like in the 20s, mid 20s. But we have a student body that is varied all the way in the 30s, 40s. We have students who are registered who are over 50. And so sometimes it's a second career. Sometimes it's, we have an agent major athlete representation. Some of them are people who are in the industry, but not.
You're right. Maybe I should still take it. Yeah, good call. Yeah. Good point.
And we have media broadcasts. Like if you want to learn from like Howard Beck, Jay Adonde, Katie Heindel, who's an incredible writer, CP, who does similar to what you do in terms of fan team-based coverage. Like he's more of a Knicks. He's Knicks Fan TV, created his own channel, created his own show. He's great.
To your family.
Yeah, I know, right out. I mean, technically, this was a great year for them. I mean, if you
it was
from the point of view of like they were really crappy, like 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm leaving out people, but we Julie and Fratello and whoever else I'm leaving out.
Mike Fratello, side note, fantastic broadcaster, and him and my good friend Rick Barry apparently have butted heads at times, but I love Fratello. Mike
is. He's got a strong personality, strong opinion. I certainly say that with all respect. Some of what he'll be doing with students is guiding them through play-by-play and commentary. So like we're at the arena and we have access that no one else has. So what we could do is, behind the courts, one of the baselines, there's tables for media. And so you'll sit, if you're in the media broadcast major, you'll sit and it basically kind of similar to what we're doing, more like a Zoom kind of setup. I don't even know the technical, whatever they're using, but it's like Zoom or whatever. And so you'll have two people, maybe you'll do a game or a quarter with Fratello, or maybe you'll do, you see what I'm saying? Like you could do the play-by-play, he can jump in with the commentary, or you're doing it with two students and he's just there to guide you. So that's like, I mean, how do you get that opportunity to learn something, and to do it like that? You're sitting at games, calling games, next to people who are also doing this for a living. It's one of those things. The salary cap stuff, the scouting video analytics, and then the agent major are all wonderful. They're all different. They all have different, it's really what you're looking to do. The way I like to explain it is like scouting video analytics is the why in terms of strategy. Yeah. Why do you like this player? Why do you like this style of play? Right? Like, what do the numbers tell you about, what's efficient? What is, why are you building the team and playing the way that you play? Why do you value Kuminga the way you do? Right? Like now the question is for the salary cap people is the how. How do we keep Kuminga? How do we add other pieces? All the questions you're asking me. So you're basically in the role of like, you've made your scouting decisions based on what you've seen in style of play and potential and untapped potential. And I'm saying, here's the how you would do it.
I love it.
So we put the two groups together and they represent different teams, 20 different teams. And they actually have a mock trade deadline where they hammer the stuff out. And so if Kuminga is not worked out by July 13th or so, or we'll choose a date on the 18th, we have our mock deadline in the morning, and we'll see what our virtual warriors, our mock warriors do with Kuminga, and if someone else picks him up. So if it's not resolved by then, I'll give you the result. I'll let you know what the results are. And
what's the official date for when the offseason starts?
Well, I mean,
You know?
we're already in the off season for any team.
Well, I guess when free agency, when all the restrictions are lifted, when does
So it's complicated. Number one, the restrictions are soft. Teams are already doing what they're doing anyway.
Okay, all right.
So there is a certain amount of what you would call tampering or whatever, that as long the NBA doesn't really necessarily care as long as it doesn't leak to the media.
Don't get caught. I feel like that's the message.
Right. So don't do it on text. Have conversations with that's fine, right? But the actual rules are such that teams can negotiate with their own players. I believe it's the day after the last day of the NBA Finals. Which technically, if you think about it, I guess OKC, I'd have to think about, like, when does the game end? They go by New York time. So
like 1 a.m.
If
1
the
a.m.
game ends, I guess if the game ends before midnight New York time, because that's where the league's office is, then technically the night of the NBA Finals last game. So let's say Pacers, Thunder win, whoever. And maybe the last game is in Indiana, which makes it even easier, right? Last game's in Indiana. Whoever wins. Then the next day, which means midnight New York time, now you can start to negotiate with your own players. And so that's where and technically you can't report it, but it can leak through the Shams and the whatevers of the world. Now, then when it comes to negotiating with other players, now free agents, like undrafted free agents and your draft picks, you can negotiate with. Someone's not drafted, you can agree to an Exhibit 10. Well, technically, I'd have to think about that. Technically, I don't even know if you're technically legally able to do that. It still leaks through the media. So
out of curiosity, Eric, why do they call it Exhibit 10? It's just such a random name for that contract.
Exhibit,
you know?
It's the 10th exhibit in the UPC.
Gotcha.
So
it's a weird name.
I mean, are you saying the word 10 is weird, or just
I think that both. I guess the 10 represents the 10-day thing, but the exhibit part, I guess.
Exhibit 1 is how much you're getting paid. Exhibit 2 is how much is guaranteed. Exhibit 3 is pre-existing injuries. Exhibit 4, trade bonus. Exhibit 5 is love of the game. 6 is a physical. 7 is sign and trade. 8 is sign and trade. 7 is it's paragraph 7. It's a whole thing about whether they can suspend your player because they're out of shape or not in a certain kind of way. And then 9 and 10. 9 is the protection on injury during training camp and such. And then 10 is the ability to convert someone to a two-way or to give them a G League bonus if they play in the G League. So It's the 10th one. They didn't used to have 9 and 10. It used to be 8. And then we added 9 and then we added 10. So but
good knowledge, sir. Good knowledge.
Yeah, but I teach this stuff all the time. So if I don't know it,
still impressive. That's still impressive.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we go to some questions before I let you go?
Yeah,
sir?
No, sure.
All right. This is from Ed Farnsworth on Twitter. You can follow him at the Eddie757. He was asking if I could pass this along to you regarding base year compensation limits in a Kuminga sign and trade. I think you've actually addressed this already, if I'm not mistaken.
Kind of.
I
did address it. Yeah. But
and then the follow-up to that was, I believe the Warriors have a TPE also. What is that? Is that a trade exception? Traded
player exception. So the short term is trade exception. TPE is traded player exception.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Technically more accurate. So the challenge is that the way the rules work now is that if you use a pre-existing trade exception, pre-existing meaning one generated before the offseason. The offseason, I was saying the offseason technically starts at 9:00 New York time on June 30th. I think that's what it is. No, is it 3:00? I don't know. I get confused. I can look up. Anything that I can look up.
We'll survive. We'll survive not knowing the time.
I feel like it's earlier than that. I feel like it's 3:00. I don't know. Let's go back to that question real quick. Real quick. So like when they say that they're absorbed the full extension, it's not like a poison pill rule. There is a poison pill rule where you have to do an average of the whole contract. It's just Kuminga. If Kuminga is 30 out, the Warriors get credit for 15 out.
Okay.
Or in. That's what 15 out. So they can only take, like, it limits what they can take back. But the follow-up was also TPE. They have these pre-existing. There's a little one for Lindy, but the main one is for Kyle Anderson, 8 million, 8.8. If they use that, which they can, it does limit them to a first apron hard cap. So
Interesting.
It kind of like you have to let Kuminga go, or technically pay Kuminga a low enough number so that you can also use it. So, it's usable, but barely. All
And
right, go on to
again,
the next one.
you are clearly the right person to ask these questions. Basketball Business on Twitter at @bball_business asks if the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, this is the fantasy of Dub Nation, is
Sure.
a 3 or 4 team trade. What pathway is there for the Warriors to get involved without acquiring Giannis? So I think the question here is, can they be involved in a deal with Giannis where they're not actually getting Giannis, where they could be like a side
I
piece?
mean, like the simple answer is sure. Right now, a more
Right.
complex answer would be like, well, where is the destination? And then what contracts do the Bucks not want in that? And then if they don't want them, are they contracts that the Warriors want? So it's not like an easy like I need to know where Giannis is going before. And sure, the Warriors, if they have something to offer and something they're willing to take back, of course. All right, what do you got for me?
Arnold on Threads, AAHNULD, writes, Nas Reed and Nikhil Alexander Walker, apologies if I mispronounced his first name, would be a chef's kiss. And the odds makers, and I know they set the odds based on public perception much more than reality,
Yeah.
but they've incredibly listed the Warriors as the favorites to get Nas Reed, and they're also listed as one of the favorites to get Alexander Walker. Your thoughts? I mean, are the Warriors actually in play for these guys? Can they get these guys and Kuminga, or is it either or?
I would say that the way that these odds makers work is they put out stuff like that, but if you actually go to their site, you can't actually bet on those things. Now that's
bet
not
online you can, but that's a good point. All the other ones I've listed, you're right. They were not from a betting site. So good call on that. The Giannis one was the only one.
The other is like these kind of sites. Like one of the odds that you could bet was that LeBron would be the Lakers' next coach, which is strictly prohibited in the rules. So they were theoretically, if they're taking bets on something that is not even legal. So I don't go by odds makers. They're people who are, basically their PR.
Yes,
their
sir.
promotion for a gambling.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right.
So they don't reflect any reality. They can reflect they can reflect at least they can at least reflect a trend in thinking or a thought, and maybe there's something to dig into. Now the challenge is like, number one, why would the Timberwolves want to do that?
Good point.
Right
Well,
off the
I don't
bat,
think
like,
they would. Yeah, I don't
right.
think they
So
would.
like you have to have a motive. So what is the motive? If they want to keep Nas Reed and Nikhil Alexander Walker, why don't they just keep them? That's one. Well, you may say it's too expensive. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If it isn't, they keep them. Then the next question, if they think that they're too expensive, do they want Buddy and Moody? And then also they can't acquire Kuminga sign and trade if they're above the first apron, of which that's kind of the issue, is if they're trying to lower their salary, like they're just going to pay Nas Reed, not sign Kuminga for 30 million, right? So, or 20 million or whatever. So like, sure, is there some universe, but just keep in mind that if you're doing that, like, does Nas Reed opt in to be traded to the Warriors? No, he can get more money by opting out. If he does all that, the Warriors have to get under and stay under for the entire year, the first apron. Does Nas Reed work getting 30, 25, whatever million he wants? The Warriors can pay Kuminga that because they have the rights. They don't have the rights to do that with Nas.
Gotcha.
So I don't see how that's reasonable to project that right now. Now, if you gave me intel that suggested like, oh, there's, the Timberwolves are moving on, they're not going that direction, they love Kuminga, and I'm like, okay, well, let's try to figure out how to get them under these aprons. Is there a place for Julius Randle? Where does he end up? You start asking additional questions. There's not enough in this tweet, I guess, to
that's fair. Yeah, post whatever you call it,
to really properly answer. But no, off of the tweet, yes, if we really dug into some edge case that like theoretical, it would go back to your Dumb and Dumber. Like, you're telling me there's a chance? There's always a chance for anything that can be made legal. So
I'm going to get to that in just 1 second, that final put. But real quick, a question from me, if you don't mind. Is it advantageous for, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, would it be advantageous for the Warriors to hold off on offering Kuminga a new deal because of the bird rights? Meaning, can they use, let's say, like a full mid-level exception and then sign Kuminga when they're already like first apron?
So can they trigger a hard cap, which is a hard spending limit, no matter what, for an entire year? Or can they wait to trigger it and then go over this hard limit that you can't go over in any circumstance ever?
Yes, that's my
No.
question.
You can't ever go over a hard spending limit ever. It's not the NBA has a soft cap. What you're describing is a soft cap. It has an optional hard cap. If you choose to hard cap, in all circumstances, you cannot exceed that hard cap.
So bird rights have a limit, and that's the hard cap.
There's no limit on the bird rights. There's a limit on the hard cap. You still have the
But
right.
I'm saying the hard cap trumps bird rights, meaning like if a player has bird rights,
trumps everything.
but
the only thing it doesn't trump is an Exhibit 10, which doesn't count against the cap.
oh, okay. So if there's a hard cap, meaning if the Warriors trigger a first apron hard cap, which is what, 190 million approximately?
Which one? The first apron?
The first apron, yeah.
Okay, so the first apron is projected to be 195.9.
Okay, so let's say if the Warriors trigger the first apron hard cap at 195, and they're up to, let's say, 185, or they're at 190, they can only offer Kuminga up to the hard cap amount. Like even though he has bird rights, they can't use that to
They
go
can
above
use the bird rights, but not to spend over that line. So the rights exist, but they can't use them.
God, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, teams
and
don't
here's the last
lose
question.
their exceptions. Like teams aren't losing like their mid-level; they just can't use it. Like the Warriors will have a full mid-level exception, but if they're too close, they can't use it. So there's a lot of things. They if they have the what is it, the Kyle Anderson trade exception, and they're over the first apron, they have it, can't use it. So you're not losing the things; you're just losing the ability to use them because you chose willingly to execute a hard cap. And just keep it in mind, it's all about acquiring another team's player, these hard caps, or you're spending on another team's free agent, except in the rare case that maybe you have a player that you had for 1 year and you don't have enough rights to pay them the market value. Then you might run into some trouble. But if you have a player for 3 years, you can do whatever the hell you want. Pay them for as much as you want, pay as much tax as you want. At some point,
those hard caps are
they're not. You don't have a hard cap at that point because you haven't triggered one, because you're not. And that's why the Warriors got so expensive. Although some of it is also the 2016 loophole with how the thing went with that enabled them to get KD. But once they had KD, now they could use his rights to get him into D'Angelo, to get him into Wiggins, to get Wiggins into Jimmy. Just like the Clippers were able to get like all of these players into Norm Powell, into James Harden, and Paul George, which then led to whatever. So it's really all about a team making a decision on direction, and it's why someone like Kuminga, if you're going to commit to him, if you're the Warriors, it's a significant commitment.
It is.
Yeah. You can't just think about just this year. It's not a 1 year thing. It's not. As much as Dunleavy might want to say that, and we're taking him out of context, but
no. Dunleavy didn't say that in reference to.
That's what I'm saying. We're taking him out of context. We are taking him out of context, but it isn't just you have to consider the impact of Kuminga on this 1 year project and the long-term health of the team. And if Kuminga is more valuable than the 1 year, then you have to pay him. But if he's not, then you have to not pay him, or you have to delay paying him, which puts him in a position to maybe take $8 million, which, as you said, isn't going to happen. But it could. If you really have a bad dispute, it could come down to that. But I think, a sign and trade is not perfect. We talked about how complex that is. There's a pathway forward. This is what Dunleavy's being paid to do. This is what Lacob and his, final approval. And this is what Kuminga's agent is being paid to do, is to find a solution to all this. And all the others,
The Dunleavy comments were in reference to the team's commitment to the core of Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy Butler.
Right, but that's all.
They're both
all connected. It's all connected. The Kuminga decision entirely impacts that 1 year decision on those three, because are you going to surround them with the players that make them the best that they can be, or are you going to be half in, half out, worrying about the future of Kuminga and being a team where Kuminga could be the best Kuminga he could ever be? Or are you worried about making Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond the best that they can be? And those two things may not mesh. And when Kuminga asked for 35, that decision might have already been made, even if Lacob loves him. So
and again,
now,
that's all based on the premise that Jimmy Butler, Kuminga, and Draymond can play on the court together, which again, that's a premise I don't agree
sure,
on.
but if I've talked to a lot of different teams and they aren't sure that like Kuminga is an athlete and he's very good at a lot of things, but there's a perception, right or wrong, from a lot of scouts, from a lot of other teams, people who are paid more money than I am to do that aspect of the job. Whether I'm paid more to do my aspect, I don't know.
That's fair.
But
Yeah, I get it.
they're paid to do something that I don't do. I can scout from a non-scout. I'm not. Everyone is an NBA scout if you're in this industry long enough, where you can start to give an opinion
Yes,
that
sir.
holds some value on what a player can do and all that. My opinion, ultimately, just like I said, as we teach in sports business classroom, I'm more of the how. And I'm trusting the people I work with to be more of the why. And so if you want to take my opinion on the why, I'll include it and I have some insight.
No,
But
that's
I'm going to
fair.
defer.
So what you're
I'm saying in general, not just to you, in general.
I know, and what I'm just trying to be accurate here, right? That's all I ever try to be, from pretty much is from what your sources have told you, and these sources being agents, scouts, and otherwise, that they don't think Kuminga's the right fit for the Warriors from their perspective.
Yeah, like well, I mean, again, it's like Mathurin is really well valued by some scouts, but don't think he's going to ever be that in Indiana. So he needs to go somewhere else to be that. Kuminga is a really talented player, but he's never going to be who he is. It's also why Reed Shepherd this last year in Houston didn't even get to play, and he was considered one of the best prospects coming in. Somebody who the GM poll said would be like one of the best players in this draft class in 5 years. We don't know. We didn't get a chance to see him play. So that, Kerr does not own the veteran coach trying to win now, not trusting young players to make stupid decisions, because honestly, they do, because they don't have the brain development of playing in the league for years, unless you find those really rare cases. Most guys, they come in, you need to fail until you succeed. That's just
And
Eric,
I think a huge point of consternation for a lot of folks here in the Bay Area, at least, was the double standard treatment that Kerr had with Podziemski and Kuminga. Like he seemed to have full board trust in Podziemski by year 2, where he's a starter, he's playing 35, 40 minutes. But with Kuminga, in Kerr's mind and others,
Podziemski, the need of the team and the fit of the team is vastly different, where they need some speed and youth at guard. Now, Podziemski makes a ton of stupid mistakes, right? Like, that's just, I've seen them, right? But, like I talked to Dunleavy Sr., Papa Dunleavy, Mike's father, also Mike.
Former Lakers head coach, former player.
When they drafted, when they drafted Sean Livingston, also a Warrior. And
this was the Clippers, right?
This is the Clippers. And when Sean was a rookie, he was saying, like, Sean is at this point already a veteran defender. I could put him on the court and know, even though his body's slight and he doesn't have a lot of heft, he's got great length and he knows how to play defensively. Offense, it's a mess. He was saying at the time, like, I love what he will be, but it's a mess right now. But I can afford to play him because I can work around the offensive limitations, but I know defensively he can play.
Yeah.
A lot of coaches have that approach. So Podziemski, with his speed and his aggressiveness and whatever he does, fits a need at that guard spot that they desperately needed. And like, maybe they, Moody, they needed these younger guards because of their makeup. Whereas at the forward, it's just a different thing. And also the bend that Kuminga has is he's a talented guy who can score and wants to score. And they don't want to run the offense through Kuminga that way, because they would rather it be through all of these, the maze that they put defenders through to get Steph open. And then all of the offense that's created off of that with Draymond as the point guard functionally. Right. So like, that's the Warriors, right? Like, that's what they've been, even when, they had KD and all that. It was still this crazy thing. It's hard to go away from that and let Kuminga develop into something that could be uniquely special to who he is, when they're trying to do something uniquely special to one of the greatest players who ever played the game.
Yeah, and again, this is where I will agree with Draymond Green, who said publicly on his show last week, and I'm so thankful he said that look, from my perspective, he could fit, he could play, and it's just
Sure.
and look,
But
Steve, it's Steve.
also, like, I don't trust what anyone says. I don't take people at face value. They say things. Not saying he's lying at all, but this is a teammate of his. He could be just trying to build up his teammate too. Like there's a lot of he's not going to say no. I don't think this guy fits, and then it's a huge story. And now it's like Bleacher's aggregating that Draymond doesn't think that Kuminga fits. Now it's a whole. You see what I'm saying? So like on a
Well, he's going to get aggregated either way, Eric. Either he's pushing back against his coach,
you're aggregating what is it, pablum? You're aggregating just like a placebo functionally. You're aggregating words that don't mean anything versus aggregating words that don't mean anything also, but are negative. So I
love Draymond. He's a very forthright, authentic individual. I love him for that and so much more. I know
smart.
He's very high IQ. He's polarizing as well. And part of the polarization,
track of his emotions sometimes, but as a
exactly.
Being,
and again, those emotions came into play with Kevin Durant in his final year, and that leads to this final question. His username is not showing on the screen. I apologize to Ultimate Warrior on Threads, who spells his username rather uniquely, but he has a pipe dream, and I feel like a lot of members of Dub Nation have this pipe dream. They're never letting go of Joe Lacob's white whale, Kevin Durant. In your opinion, sir, and we'll finish on this note, is there any possibility of Durant coming back to the Warriors? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, if you want to succeed as the Warriors, you do not want to do that. And I love Durant, but it's like Durant is not the same guy he was that many years ago, primarily in defensive ability and mobility. The reason why the Suns are, a mess is because you don't have athletic, like if you put him like the Timberwolves going after Durant, now we can talk because you have athletes outside of Mike Conley, you have athletes and speed everywhere, and you have like length and all of it. Like you have McDaniels and KD and Gobert. Now you can offset, like now KD's fine. He's not fast, but his length with all the other length, right? Warriors don't have this incredible length.
Right.
Like when it worked, a lot of it was because of the length of KD, even playing center, right? Like
yes, sir.
Draymond was like the small ball 5, but also KD was the small ball 5 defensive.
Yes, sir.
In a lot
Correct.
Of cases,
right?
Right?
And Iguodala. People forget Iguodala was a huge part of that too.
So
and Clay, who's 6'7". Yeah.
Right. Like, so like KD is, an elite Hall of Fame talent, one of the best of his generation, one of the top of all time. I don't know where he is on the top 150 list. I don't know, wherever, top 100, top 50. I don't know where I would place him. I think I made something up at some point, and I'd have to like look and see where I have him.
Say top 20 is a fair thing to.
I mean, of all time, I don't think. I don't know if I'd have him top 20 of all time, but I think he in terms of scoring, he's among there. It's hard to judge his career because he played with Steph, and he only really won with Steph.
You're right.
Steph having won without him, right? Like Steph won 2 without him. Was it
2? Correct. Yeah, the first and last.
So Steph won 2 without him. So it gets a little more nebulous. It's harder to argue against Steph, which obviously is a Warriors podcast. Why would you argue against Steph?
And again, I try to be objective, Eric, but when it comes to Steph, that's where I turn into a bit of a fan. He's
you can
amazing.
argue Steph. Yep. Well, easily the greatest shooter of all time. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. If you want to argue he's best of all time, you can argue it. I can do counter arguments and we can argue that, but he's certainly in the top 10 and we can argue he's top 5.
I agree.
And we can debate it and fight it and say, like, how many titles do you need? One more title, it gets really hard it gets harder and harder, but same with LeBron, right? And we could talk about efficiency and how many years you played and all the factors. Like, as great as Jordan was, he didn't play as long as LeBron. He hasn't played as long as Steph. And how many finals? Okay, he was in 6 finals and won 6. Why was he only in 6 finals? Michael Jordan, right? Like LeBron went to a lot more finals. Steph has been to more finals. How many finals? I forget how many finals has Steph been to. Is it 6?
I think they're tied on that front. They're 6.
So,
6.
like, was Steph as efficient?
No, that's a good point. These are great points.
But Steph wasn't like. Where was Michael Jordan's LeBron that he had to beat?
Oh, in his era, I guess it was like
there
Magic, but they didn't overlap.
No. Magic. When they beat Magic, it was the first one, and no Kareem.
He was done.
Magic was starting. And Magic were not the same.
Yeah.
And so, so Michael got destroyed by the Lakers, destroyed by the Pistons, destroyed by the Knicks, the Celtics. I guess not the Knicks, the Celtics, the Pistons, and the Lakers.
Did
Not
the
even
Sixers
Lakers. It didn't even matter because Lakers didn't matter because they were in the West. So like he couldn't beat those teams until they aged out, until Isaiah broke down, until Larry Bird's back gave out.
No,
and
that's a great point, Eric. That's the one
point,
thing about Jordan's legacy I can't push back on.
It was a time of expansion, right?
He did not have a rival in the 90s that
like
was
Kobe had Duncan. Okay.
You're
Duncan
right.
is arguably top 5 of all time. Kobe is arguably top 5 of all time. Now we can debate. Some would say no, he's 10, 6, whatever. I don't care. We can.
If you want to come back to that show, let me know. We could. That is a fun topic. I'll happily set that up.
That if Steph didn't win because LeBron won, and they are the 2 greatest of all time from their era, then that's like Magic didn't win every year and Bird didn't win every year because they were going against each other. I grew up in the Jordan era as well, so I get it. And I'm just saying, Jordan was amazing. He was a killer. He was one of the best players I've ever seen live, and I've seen him multiple times live. So it's not, and I've seen all these players.
Eric, you know who the one guy is that you could say maybe is in the conversation with Jordan, but they never actually faced each other in the finals, and that's Hakeem, right? Hakeem Olajuwon was incredible. Different positions, I get it. And the Rockets won their 2 championships.
Why was Hakeem only in the finals twice?
Yeah, exactly. And
right?
I hear you. I hear you.
Why didn't Hakeem dominate the Jazz? Why didn't he? And Malone and Stockton, who never won. Why didn't he? There was no. They had incredible stars, incredible players, but it was also a time of growth and globalization of the game, which you fall in love with that. When the game blew up internationally, we fell in love, the world, with the sport, with those stars at the time who were incredible. And in today's game would be incredible, right? Olajuwon would be incredible in today's game. So not diminishing them, but Jordan didn't have his LeBron for Steph.
No, you're right.
So it's not
and he had Pippen. And he had a Pippen. LeBron didn't have that. So we could do a whole show on that. Anytime you want, I'm serious. Text me, say I'm in the mood to just spend an hour
after July, after my program.
Let me know. Let's do it. I'm in. I'll follow your schedule in that regard. But you say when.
Me. I'm not going to remember. I'm not going to remember. You text me.
All right, sir. And one last time, let's promote away because we should. I'm a professor myself. I'm an educator, so I value education in general. I'm never going to tell people not to go to college, not so much for the classroom side of it, but because of the social side of it, because of the personal growth you gain from the college experience. I mean, there's obviously things to learn in the classroom as well. But your what do you call it? A seminar? Is it a school? A classroom? Whatever label we're going to put on it.
I mean, we call it like an immersive experience more than anything because
there you go.
You're there in the building for a full week.
There you go.
And it's not. This is not sitting in an auditorium listening to me and Bobby Marks talk about how we got into the industry 20, 30 years ago, right? Like I got in 20 something like that. I got in when LeBron came in. It's interesting, perhaps, to hear how I got in. I wouldn't even argue that it is. Like it is to me and it is to some people, but you shouldn't be paying money to hear me talk about how I broke into the industry. However, you should want to break in yourself and learn how to do that. So we have a professor, Jeff Fellenzer, who's with USC, who will meet with any student who wants to. Out of our 135 last year, he met with over half or right around half, and we'll look at their resumes and give advice and give you his number and continue the conversation after the thing. So that okay, what is it about your resume? I've made my resume. I've been fortunate. I've never gotten a job off a resume. Someone asked in a position with a team to give them a resume. I said, Jeff, when I got the job with the LA Times, I made up a resume in Word and used the default template and just filled it in with whatever. And they had already hired me, but they needed a resume on file. Same thing with Bleacher. I had already gotten the job. They needed a resume on file. So this is the first time I'm actually trying to send someone a resume. And I added stuff he was coach my girls team, can do a Rubik's Cube and all blah, 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 blah. All the little weird things that, I did a reality show for an episode with my wife, some years ago. It's a whole,
okay.
yeah, all this nonsense.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I sent it to somebody who owns a team, and that person reached back out to me and like, I didn't know that you did this, that, or the other thing. They clearly read it. It was so much of a better resume than what I had initially. Like the initial one was like, it told you nothing about me other than I went to UCLA and I worked for the LA Times and all this other stuff. So it's that kind of care that we put into the program. Like it's holistic. Seth wrote the book on analytics. He's writing a second book. Steve Jones is Steve Jones from the broadcaster Portland.
Yeah.
His son, and he's been with teams. Right now he's doing a podcast with Nekias Duncan, who's incredibly brilliant with like what they player eval scouting. And then Steven Alves is like he works for the Pelicans. He works with Bobby pretty closely. And last year was the first year with us, and he's just like one of the most brilliant guys that you're going to meet. And he's super soft-spoken, super sweet, and he like lives and die by who he would love to have been part of this argument. He would have brought in a ton of. He probably would have argued against Kuminga, is my opinion. But I'll ask him. And then Connor. What's interesting about Connor in our scouting video and analytics instructors is that 2 years ago he was a student, and he was such a good student that last year we brought him back as support staff, which is the people who helped me produce it. Nice. And then this year we promoted him to full-fledged instructor because like the guy is, top shelf. He's just really, really incredible. So, but you're learning from them, like what are you looking for when you're, because, the casual fan and obviously if you're watching Golden Days, you're not just casual, right? Like you're obviously somebody who's a little more diehard or crazy or whatever.
I call us the highest IQ audience in at least Warriors basketball. Yeah.
So, but the casual fan like literally just watches the ball. And if you have 10 players on the court, they're probably watching the ball. And if Alex Caruso is like all over that person or Nemhard or something like that, you're like, okay, I see that. But you don't see what the other 8 players are doing. Not you, but the
no, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And like, how does Steph get open? How is he always open? How does he get to these open looks? Part of it is because like he just needs the ball in his hand for like a split second, but also because there's these actions that they're running. And then how are the defenses trying to counter that? That's what they're teaching you, how to see that, how to look for it, how to, scout it, how to chop it up into film. It's an area of hoops that I love. And if I were to take the program, it's literally what I would personally take, because that's an area that I would want to grow more in, because I'm in this area, which is, Yossi's formerly with Hoops Hype. Keith is with Spotrack. Yossi has a great Substack, Third Apron. Bobby's on ESPN.
And you're on Substack now, correct?
Yeah, I am on Substack, by the way. Yeah, I am on Substack. I should promote that more. I created a paid tier. I'm putting out like semi-regular, like free content about once a week, shooting for something, maybe once every 2 weeks, something paid. Like the next one I'm going to write is, I had done an article for Bleacher last year on like who is paying tax and whatnot. And I want to update it with the most recent season. And I'm going to do that on my Substack to just say like, here's an update, here's the data. So I'm including, like I did one paid post was like every rookie scale extension of the last few years. I think 3 years I did. So you can like, all right, if you want your guy, you're an agent or you're, a player who is looking for that, or you're a fan of a team and you're saying like, okay, well, how, Jalen Johnson got this much, and like, well, what is Dyson Daniels going to get now, right? So you have, but it gives you at least in a singular place a frame of reference. Okay, this is what everybody got over the last 3 years in this same position. So I'm doing like a little bit deeper dive stuff in my Substack, and I think there's one pin to my. There must be one pin to my Twitter. If not, I'll make sure there is. I don't know. I probably need to promote myself a little bit more. I'm just a little. It's more the busy aspect. I'm focused.
Yeah,
right now.
you got a lot going on. Yeah.
But yeah, you're always going to get links to my articles, and then a little bit more context into like why I wrote what I wrote on Bleacher Report, why, and then the scouting reports that our former students, our scouts with Sportsman's the Classroom, they watch players and then in college and write up scouting reports. So I'm going to do a show, I think tomorrow. Yeah, Thursday. Yeah. And I'm like, they want me to talk about players in the draft that I honestly, like, if you were one of them, I wouldn't know. Like, I know what Cooper Flagg looks like. Right. And I know like a few of them, but like, honestly, like, I don't know these players because I don't watch college. I just don't have time with all the workload that I have. But I know from my scouting reports, so I'll be forthright. I don't really watch these players, but this is what my scouts tell me, and I'll pull up they want to ask about a player, I'll give a scouting report. And that's from our former students. So, and I link to those. I link to, like I'll probably put a link to this podcast into my free Substack and just say, hey, I did this show for 3 hours now, or however many hours.
Yeah, I know, we're 2, and I'm sorry, brother.
That's all right.
Thank you.
I did one with Ciro Aseo, who's with Hoops Hype. We did a 2-hour one recently. Yeah, I'm long-winded. You're long-winded.
I appreciate you, man. I know I'm taking your time for this, and
it's all good.
I just can't thank you enough. I am very appreciative, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Look, I respect and I value people who, in this part of your head, your body right here, this part, we all have a brain. Not everyone's using it. Some people actually decide, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this tool that we're all blessed with. But you're one of them. So I respect you for that.
Thank you. I'll say humbly that I feel like we're all given more or less the same stats in total. It's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, where your stat sheet, like some players, like for instance, Kyle Anderson is slow, right? That's one of his stats, right? Okay. And Steph on the shooting is a 10, but he's not. And when I coach my girls, like he's not. At the time, I'd say like Kobe's not Shaq, right? Kobe can't rebound like Shaq can, or he can't, or if you say like, Andre Drummond, who is like whoever was leading the league in blocks right now, Chet Holmgren, like Steph compared to Chet is a terrible player if you're measuring blocks as the decisive, most important category, right? Obviously it's not, but point is, I think that all of us are given like a certain, some are given blessings and some are not in life, and there are inequities certainly, and certain privileges that I've been fortunate to have. I'm high statted in this particular area. You've never seen me shoot a jump shot. It's ugly. I can set a screen, although I can't even run up and down the court right now because the wind is gone. So like the areas that I excel in, I equally am lousy in other areas. So I say that to say that to students, like our job, just like with the basketball team, it's to find what you're strong at. Find where you can, succeed. And some people are introverted and they're not going to be the person who can get up and like create that elevator pitch and like get someone really excited about them in a very brief time. But there are some of those people have absolutely incredible minds for maybe analytics who can do a model that, like, I have one student and he's got a great personality. I'm not, singling him out on that, but he models like comparative player types where like you give him a player, you say Moody, who is he most like based on the analytics, and he'll go through the entire season based on the season. He could show who ran the common play types, had a similar role on defense, and it's just fascinating stuff. And so not singling him out if he was maybe not as maybe he's introverted. I'm not saying he isn't, but if he was, like, everyone kind of has these different stat based assets and liabilities, and myself included. I just, I love hoops, and I was never going to contribute in any other way. You know what I mean? So, use my knowledge and my experience. Mostly it's just me doing the homework. It's hard for me I can't remember certain things, like where I'm supposed to be in 5 minutes, but I can't forget, like, certain stats and well, not even that, like salaries and contract questions. So, if you're watching this and you feel like, oh, this is intimidating or whatever, no, it's like we break it down into understandable chunks and help you get there. And I didn't start at this point. I started, with an aptitude for it.
Yes, sir.
But it took years to develop it. And so you just can't be afraid of putting in the years. I guess, if anything, patience is the true virtue here, which
very eloquently put, and experience means so much. Some people are blessed in this world to know what they want to do in life for at an early age. Others are not. Sure. And the sports business classroom, I think, is a great opportunity for both of those types of individuals. If you know specifically something you want to do in sports or in the NBA, even more specifically here, I'm guessing there's going to be a specific instructor and or class that fits your niche. Maybe you have no clue what you want to do other than the fact that you love the NBA. This is where maybe you register for Sports Business Classroom, take some classes, and then you'll figure that part out during this experience. Sure. The point is, I love it. This is an educational, immersive opportunity. If you want to get into the NBA or just even learn a little more about it, I could say this safely. I'm not going to have time to take a class this year. Maybe next year, though. Maybe next year I might show up, because I do believe firmly. I did say something that I'm gonna push my back on myself on here, which is that I said maybe 20 years ago I could have come. I take that back. That was actually a naive statement on my part. I could literally take this class now and be a better human being. So
you're learning from people in the industry, and you're building your network, and you're gonna be able to learn something, and then equally you're going to bring something. Like Connor brought something to the table enough that now he's teaching for us. So sometimes it's, what I'll say is there's a place in the application. If you do sign up, just put in Golden Days, and then I'll just make sure that the students who sign up, if anyone can complete that, they get a perk, or I'll find a way to get them a perk. So put it in there. And I'll find a way to upgrade it somehow. Their package. All right. In some way.
Thank you. Well, there you go. That's a perk for the Golden Days audience right there. And I'll remember to mention that in future episodes. And again, Eric Pincus, you write for a lot of publications. You have your own Substack. How can people find your Substack? Is it just your name?
I mean, Google Eric Pincus Substack. But beyond that, I don't know. I should have a better answer. Go to my Twitter. I mean,
usually people have a handle or like a name of the actual Substack.
I've been on it a very short period of time, and it's more of a bandwidth issue than anything else. But just go to @EricPincus on Twitter /X, and you should see something pinned. I know I had a Bronny post pinned for a really long time, but I think I changed it to a different one. So
I just Googled Eric Pincus Substack, and your Substack was the very first thing to come up.
Okay, there you go.
That's the easiest way to find it. You have a Substack page. You're on Bleacher Report. You've got the Sports Business Classroom. Go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Mention Golden Days for a special perk from one of the professors of the classroom, and that is Eric Pincus. Eric, thank you, brother. In 2 hours, I don't know what to say other than just I'm appreciative. I'm grateful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you asked if I had a heart out. I guess not. So I now I have to pay the price of that. So let me go.
Yeah, I followed the guest lead. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Eric.
Hopefully there wasn't anything
And that was Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report. If you're still with us at this point of the 2 hour 11 mark, thank you as always. And look, at a bare minimum, every one of these shows that I do with Eric, I come out of it far more informed, educated, for good reason. And I definitely have a much better grasp now of the salary cap. So that's good to know. Tomorrow's episode, Mark Jones of ESPN joins us. He's going to give us his take on the NBA postseason, on your Golden State Warriors. And then either Thursday or Friday, I think I'm going to bring Armando Laura on the program to do a recap of the Steve Kerr Media Tour. That has to be covered. I'm going to include Jonathan Kuminga's comments, Draymond Green's comments that was referenced in today's episode. So that'll be coming this week as well. And plenty of other guests, plenty of other topics. June 30th is the date that Eric mentioned, where I think a lot of huge transactions are going to start dropping. But for the Golden State Warriors, the Jonathan Kuminga piece is clearly the biggest part of all this. And until we figure out what happens there, it's hard for anyone to know what's next for your Golden State Warriors. But hopefully you're tuning into us to find out. Can't thank you enough, as always. And I guess we are done. See you all soon. Thank you. Thanks to Eric Pincus. Bye-bye.